Good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Andrew Johnson, and I'm the chair of the Intergovernmental Relations Committee. I'm going to call to order our regular meeting for Tuesday, March 7th, and I'll now ask the clerk to call the roll to verify that we have a quorum of the committee.
Councilmember Payne is absent. Wansley?
Present.
Vita?
Present.
Ellison? Osman? Goodman?
Present.
Jenkins? Chavez? Chugtai?
Present.
Koski?
Present.
Palmisano?
Present.
Carl Chavez.
Councilmember Chavez?
Present.
Vice Chair Rainville?
Present.
Chair Johnson?
Present.
There are 9 members present.
Let the record reflect that we have a quorum. We have 2 items on our consent agenda today. The first is a resolution in support of the University of Minnesota Graduate Labor Union, and the second are a series of 5 amendments to the legislative agenda and policy positions. I want to see if anyone has discussion on any of these items. Feel free to put up your little placard or use speaker management as well, which I'm logged into. I see Councilmember Wansley in queue. Councilmember.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I just wanted to get in queue to speak in terms of a series of my items, specifically on item 1, but the support for the University of Minnesota Graduate Labor Union. So many folks are aware that on February 20th, graduate students announced the intention to create a graduate labor union, and within 48 hours, they got over 2,000 graduate workers who signed union cards. So I think this absolutely speaks to the dire economic conditions that graduate students work under. They are compensated far below a living wage and have unaffordable health benefits. And even though you literally cannot exist without this labor, it's very clear, like, students have had to go forward with taking this action in order to get their needs met. But I am super excited to bring this forward. I absolutely want to thank the graduate student workers who have done an amazing job organizing this union drive. This is already a historic accomplishment, considering this is now, I think, the 6th try for this at the University of Minnesota. So this resolution establishes a position of official support for these graduate workers. It also urges the University of Minnesota to remain a neutral partner or party throughout the unionization process. So if the union is formed, again, this resolution will also urge the U to bargain in good faith with the recognized union too. So again, super excited, especially since our ward has the largest student population. So really excited to support our graduate student workers in these efforts.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. These are consent items, yet these are major policy issues on item number 2. Are you intending to take them all up separately, or just have us vote on them individually, or?
You know, these, Councilmember Goodman, these are on the agenda as consent items. If you would like to pull item number 2, we can take them up individually, one by one.
Oh, I'm just happy to vote on them all if you want us to, or however you want to do it.
I look to the pleasure of the body on this, so if there's interest in doing that, I'm happy to do that.
But I have no issue with item number 1, so I don't want to, maybe you should separate items 1 and 2 and pull 2 for discussion. But if that's the will of the council.
That sounds good. I see several other people in queue, so what I'll do is I'll see, does anyone else have interest in speaking on item number 1? Otherwise, I'll just move that ahead and then we'll deal with item number 2 and take up these policy amendments individually. So anyone on item number 1? Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I do have a question for our IGR staff. We've supported labor negotiations through the private sector in the past, but this is through another government agency. And I'm wondering, what is the effect of that? Have we been in touch with the U on this?
Director Topinka. Or,
Can I also ask, in terms of the question of speaking with the U, we've been in consultation with the University District Alliance, which Councilmember Rainville, I think you're also a part of since you represent the board. So we've been in touch with Tina there. So government agencies have been notified, but absolutely, Director, you can also talk about the impact of the piece.
all right, Director Topinka, welcome.
Thank you, Chair Johnson and Vice Chair Rainville and committee members. I also notified our contact at the University of Minnesota. I haven't been in conversation with them about it, but just wanted to make sure they were aware. I didn't get a response back in terms of in the past. I can't really speak to it. I'm not exactly sure how we've weighed in on these in the past. So I would have to do a little research and get back to you on that, unless anyone else has historical knowledge of that.
Yes, I'm just wondering, again, we're a government agency, they're a government agency. Is it appropriate for us to comment on their labor negotiations?
I think that is a decision probably for this body. Would be
Okay,
my
that's our
suggestion,
call.
Vice
Great,
Chair.
thank you.
Thank you. And I see Councilmember Wansley with the placard up and Councilmember Goodman in queue. So Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I just wanted to provide some clarification. So right now, there's no labor negotiations that's taking place because the graduate students are not unionized. What they're attempting to do is to form a union. So we're not weighing in on any active negotiations because there's not a collective bargaining currently in existence to represent graduate students. I will say we have weighed in on these issues when there has been active negotiations prior to Director Topinka. You all might be or might recall earlier last year that we passed 2 resolutions in support of the Starbucks workers as well as educators that were actually in active negotiations. So we have a precedence in supporting recognized collective bargaining units and stating official positions. And also in the past, we've been encouraged to reach out to the governmental agencies that are, representing the negotiating parties. In the case of the educators, we reached out to NPS as well as, their other agencies. Same with Starbucks workers. We reached out to, Starbucks to let them know that this was happening. And as I mentioned, we reached out to the UDA, so they're well aware that we're moving forward with this.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Goodman.
A couple of points. Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, if the university was worried about it, they'd be here. Second of all, asking them to practice neutrality and exercise good faith in bargaining is like a basic. That's the law. So I wouldn't say it's really controversial to suggest that they follow the law. In fact, I'm supporting it, if that means anything to anyone. I feel like ultimately that is very basic language, and it's more making a point. I'll also note that the University of Minnesota, although it's a government entity, also loves to say that they operate completely on their own. They have their own zoning regulations. They can override us on a number of things. So they're a public institution, but I'm not sure I'd call them a government agency. But we're just simply asking them here to be neutral and bargain in good faith, and I think that that's acceptable. And if they had a concern about it, they would send Tina or someone else on their well-meaning staff to be here. So I don't think it's that big of a deal.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. I'm not seeing anyone else in queue, so we'll just do a voice vote on item number 1. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. That motion carries. Next, we'll move on to item 2.1, and that is amending the legislative agenda to reflect changes related to the classification of public safety complaint data. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. So this amendment relates to statewide policy for data practices and around discipline. Currently, there is a state policy that has created a huge loophole in discipline data transparency for the police. MPD has been able to use this loophole in conjunction with the practice of assigning coaching rather than discipline to avoid transparency that residents deserve. Some of you might also recall, especially if you sit on POGO, last year I worked with our chair, Chair Ellison, to bring forward experts in this topic to give a presentation in the POGO committee. Those experts included former PCOC Chair Abigail Serra, as well as University of St. Thomas Professor Rachel Moran, who gave an extensive presentation on this topic. I've also been in close conversations with former Councilmember Paul Ostro, who also has been advocating for better transparency as it relates to police at both the city and state level. There is consensus amongst these folks, as well as other experienced professionals, that there needs to be statewide data policy changes around police misconduct. This is a key part of correcting MPD's history of evading accountability for officer misconduct and creating a better culture going forward. I also want to give thanks to City Attorney Kristen Anderson, who our office worked with, and making sure that the language in this amendment is consistent with the amendment that Councilmember Payne brought forward and that we passed. It complements that amendment by adding an additional mechanism for accountability within the disciplinary data framework. So just wanted to offer some clarification on that.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Payne.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Yeah, I just want to thank you, Councilmember Wansley, for bringing this forward. Former Councilmember Paul Ostro is my constituent, and I've also had very long conversations about this very specific detail as it relates to discipline data. And me and our city attorney spent many late hours trying to work around that provision within the state legislature as we were finalizing our amendments on our CCPO. So I think this is just the next logical step to really refining this and making it more workable for our community.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'm not seeing anyone else in queue, so I'll do a voice vote on 2-1. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay. That motion carries. Next, we'll move on to item 2-2. Are there any council members that want to speak on this item? Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. So this amendment supports a statewide policy change that would allow cities to mandate that peace officers carry personal liability insurance. As many of us are aware, the impacts of unaccountable police force has been incredibly expensive to taxpayers. It has been reported in the last several years that an average of $7 million is paid out annually due to police misconduct, with 2020 being a historic price tag of $111 million. Since the city is self-insured, all of these police settlements come out of the city's funds and significantly impact the general budget. This is also a topic that has been widely discussed over the past several years, with even residents back in 2017 collecting thousands and thousands of signatures to put this on the ballot in Minneapolis. But it was ultimately blocked because of current state laws. Currently, there is a state law that prohibits cities from mandating peace officers from carrying their own insurance. If there is a change at the state level, the city of Minneapolis could have continued conversations of what it could look like to shift the burden from taxpayers to police officers who are the ones engaging in misconduct, and ultimately create the culture change that I think we all are committed to driving forward within our police department. So the idea around this is to create a financial incentive for officers to behave safely and in compliance with city policy. This is essentially the same idea behind having doctors carry personal malpractice insurance. It acts as a motivator for that individual to do their job safely. I would also like to highlight that smaller cities who have been unable to rein in the bad practices of their police force have also been able to pursue some really significant changes when they saw insurers come forward and deem certain high-risk behaviors unacceptable. They've been able to leverage that to create reforms. For example, many police forces in cities throughout the country who participate in outside liability insurance have been required to change their policies and practices that have been flagged as high risk. These include policies around body cam practices, chokeholds, high-speed chases, and other behaviors that have been shown to create unsafe encounters with civilians and also result in large lawsuits. While I'm definitely not a proponent of the private market dictating public policy, in this instance where the city of Minneapolis has not been able to implement effective changes in policing around some of these high-risk behaviors, the private market might serve the residents of Minneapolis better in getting the police force to not engage in dangerous behaviors. And the current barrier to helping all this happen is this current state legislation. So this, would open that door, and this is what this amendment aims to support.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would the author yield for 2 questions?
Oh, sure.
Great. Can you name the insurance companies in the state of Minnesota that offer this insurance?
As of now, there's none because it's illegal at the state level.
So there aren't any companies that would do this. So you're essentially just saying there will be if the state law changes, but you don't know that.
I think it's vice versa. We don't know that right now. I think we know the barrier right now is state legislation that can, if that's removed, can create a market for this type of insurance to be provided.
Well, we can debate that because that's not the only barrier. The main barrier is the union contract. 4 of the council members here are working on the negotiation of the union contract. Council members Vita, myself, Chugtai, and Jenkins. Never has this come up as part of the union contract discussions that we're going into for the next 3 years. You do realize, or I guess I should put this in the form of a question, are you aware of discussions as it pertains to the police contract, or does Councilmember Chugtai want to answer that would make this something that would make this a priority for us over the next 3 years?
Yeah, I can also respond to that because we've also been in conversations with our city attorneys that I also believe is part of those conversations around the contract. What has come up time and time again, especially this past year when we debated the police contract, is we've negotiated every tool away to enact change. And that's great that you all are at the table. And this aims to complement those efforts because even if you included any provisions in the police contract, you simply can't around this because it is prohibited at the state level. So again, we would still need to take state level action. If you all at that table want to also, demonstrate support for this because you want to see this be integrated in your contract, this amendment helps support you to be able to move forward in that too. Because again, we're addressing the prohibition.
I had my 2 questions answered. I'm sure other people will comment. I might jump back in line too, just to point out what a terrible idea this is.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is not going to complement those police contract negotiation efforts. Let's play this forward. The worst bill of all here, if to implement what's on this agenda, is one that would allow municipalities to actually decide what they want to do. And we're generally here for local control. So we don't want to have some cities then choosing to say that our peace officers need to carry their own police liability insurance. If it's a statewide program, like an insurance trust, then that is something that would benefit us. It was absolutely something that would benefit Minneapolis because it would put the liability of peace officers across Minnesota at large on a statewide type of insurance program. The reason we pay now is because state law requires us to do so. And it's a hard and weird standard to get around that. It's the woefully negligent piece of it. But the way to improve this is either to remove it all or make it such that every municipality would be subject to this. So I don't see this as being helpful in any of many different ways. And I just wanted to point that out. I could see a world that this would work out, but this and us stepping out ahead of everybody else just doesn't seem appropriate here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Palmisano. Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I will say I share some of the concerns as Councilmember Goodman around this just being a bad idea, and I think it just couldn't come at a worse time. Conversations like this, us having conversations like this on the dais really hurt the morale with our staff, and this is just another conversation that I don't think we should be having right now. If states take this on and different counties and municipalities can choose what they want, if Minneapolis chooses to have police have their own insurance and St. Louis Park doesn't, here's another opportunity for us to have fewer officers than we have anyway. I mean, this is just, I don't even know why we're having this conversation right now about this, because the work we're trying to do. Also, I just want to say, we have some really good officers who actually want reform in our department, and we should be working on those things. This to me speaks to they're just not doing a good job, and we need to, figure out how they insure themselves so they will do a good job somehow. And that, I don't think that's where we are in our police department right now. And so I will not be supporting this. I won't be supporting this at all. I think it's a bad time to even have this conversation when we're putting next level recruiting efforts is going out for MPD because the numbers are so low, and conversations like this just make those numbers go down even farther. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Osman.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I agree with Councilmember Vita. I think we are trying to recruit officers, and the officers that we hire, we are sending them, in a dangerous job, and for them to know that they're not going to be protected. I don't know if anyone will take that job. The requirement of the interview or the hiring process will be, well, do you have insurance? And I don't know if anyone will be able to even come forward to that. And for that process, I don't even know if the insurance or company will be able to even take that kind of quote or process. I'm open to talking about, off-duty police officers and their behavior. I believe the city should not be responsible. That maybe we can start a discuss over there. But when they are on duty and they're doing their job, we should be responsible because we tell them, we send them in harm ways and make sure that they're protecting our residents and so on. But I'm really, really open to discussing, maybe talking to the state, talking with one another, figuring out a way when police officer is not on duty, but he's off duty and traveling somewhere in Mexico or somewhere, then when he, violates or someone's rights or act a different way, then the city should not be responsible. That should be a personal responsible within the officer. So that's my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Chair. A few things. One is I was listening to the meeting on my way over, and I would like to reflect. I'd like to vote on item 1. I know that we've already passed that, but if there's no objection from the committee, I'd like to be noted as in support of that.
I will direct the clerk to notate that, not seeing any objections.
And then same for item 2.1. Would like to be reflected my support on that. Apologies for running a bit late.
As directed. Thank you.
And then just a few comments on item 2.2 here. I think that it's really important that I guess my question is, if we don't start this conversation, at what point do we start this conversation? The city has paid out exorbitant amounts of money for the conduct of officers. I think that we've brought up several times how we might be able to address this issue. The truth is that it's going to take a multi-pronged approach. Sure, it's going to take training. Sure, it's going to take recruiting officers who don't expose us in this way. But I'm not necessarily convinced that every single large settlement that we have had to pay in the last couple of years has just been purely a personnel issue. I think we have a structural issue. I think we have a systemic issue. And so I'm going to support item 2.2, and I'm going to ask my colleagues for for those that don't, and I think that reasonable people can disagree on this issue, what starts the conversation, right? $50, $60 million in the last handful of years paid out. What starts this conversation? We're seeing conduct from officers that we don't approve of, that the community doesn't approve of. What starts this conversation? The taxpayers are on the hook no matter what. And so I think that, maybe this isn't it. I do support this today, but maybe this isn't the pathway. But if it's not, what starts the conversation? And how do community members not only protect themselves physically, but protect their tax dollars from misconduct, from having to go to pay for misconduct that they didn't approve of? I think it's an important conversation. I think it's a necessary one. And it comes up every once in a while. It comes up every couple of years. And so if this isn't the appropriate way to start this conversation, what is? And not only what is, who's ready to start working on it? And so that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I'm just wondering if, when these types of things happen, do the police officers get paid by, is their salary bumped up for them to pay the insurance, or how does that work? Like, do you offer them, if anyone could speak to that, I'm not sure, but like, how do these things work? Do they make more money and then we pay it for them? Like, how, I'm not sure how it even works for this type of coverage. Looks like Councilmember Ellison knows.
Councilmember Ellison, if you are able to answer that question.
Yeah, I mean, and if the attorneys know better than me, then they can weigh in. This is, from a policy perspective, this is uncharted territory, right? And so we would have to sort of create that pathway. I think that if we prevented ourselves from exploring new policy pathways just because it had never been done before, we would never create any new policy. And so that's why I say this might not be the exact right way to go about this. But if we're going to start this, but if it isn't, what is, right? If we and asking the question and sort of forcing the issue as this question does, it forces answers to those questions, right? It forces answers to those questions, and so I think that pretending like there's supposed to be some kind of pre-prescribed pathway towards every single nut and bolt is just not how good policy is made. You start with the question, and then you let the questions compile and answer themselves. That's how we've always created good policy here in the city, and I think that's how new and innovative policy gets created everywhere in the country.
Okay, thank you. I would just say that this seems like it could have a huge financial impact, and so let's not forget that, you know, a budget item would have to come with something like that if we haven't even decided what we're going to do. The good policy that Councilmember Ellison is speaking of has a financial impact that comes along with it. Thank you, Chair Johnson.
Thank you, Councilmember Vita. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. So I do want to highlight, I think this is the appropriate way to have a discussion. And I'm going to connect this to a couple of things that some of my colleagues have raised. Council Vice President Palmisano, you raised the concern around local control. Right now, what is preventing, as we've noted, and from even the standpoint of our residents who did a ballot initiative attempt to try to change this very thing and work with council to form a policy to do exactly what also, you know, Councilmember Ellison has highlighted, that all was stopped because we have a statewide policy that prohibits this. This starts the conversation of addressing the core barrier that prevents local control or any type of local action that can happen. That segues into the police contract, which I want to note, that cannot even be negotiated right now because we're currently having to settle bargaining, segments right now, and that's currently in the mediation process. So the police contract is already kind of tied up with some existing things that's going to prevent us from really diving into the meat of recommendations. But again, if this makes it into the recommendations, we're still going to have to, and it's already been said on record a couple of times, that it will need to be addressed at the state level. This will have to be removed from us in order for us to take action. When it comes to existing practices that we can refer to as we look to craft a policy or a product that will allow us to transfer this burden off of the backs of taxpayers, again, doctors. Are we saying it's a bad idea for doctors to have malpractice insurance? Do we think it's an insult to healthcare professionals like doctors to carry their insurance as well? We've seen these models, and I think we can refer to that. And we are already having to pay the burden of the price tag. There is already a financial impact. There was $111 million that taxpayers had to foot the bill for in 2020 because of police misconduct. And I want to highlight that ties into recruitment and retention because it has nothing to do with morale around whether or not officers are coming into our police department and staying. People are not coming and people don't want to stay because our police department has a culture that is dangerous, that is toxic, and that has been affirmed in the MDHR findings to be racist, misogynistic, and violent. By not addressing that, by not addressing the behaviors that allow for the events in May of 2020 and so on to happen, we are not going to create a different culture within that department that hopefully attracts officers that want to uphold an equitable level of service, high level of service, and also know that they do not want to engage in misconduct behaviors that's going to put financial burdens on working class people that makes up the city. So the time is now. If we are not going to trigger this conversation and take statewide action when we paid $111 million in 2020 alone, I don't know what else would be. That should be the trigger point for us to have a discussion to say that our residents should not keep footing the bill for this, and that we actually want to take serious action around addressing the culture of unaccountability within our police department. And I don't see how that's controversial. This is one of the ways in which we can take that action within our authority. And I look forward to at least demonstrating to the public that I don't want you to have to keep subsidizing the misconduct of some of our officers, to keep subsidizing for the high-risk behaviors, for the violence that our MDHR findings that are now yielding 2 consent decrees, likely from the DOJ as well. This is our time to be able to do something to stop you from also financially paying the price, because we did not rein in MPD. So I look forward to taking action. I hope my colleagues will too.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Payne.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Yeah, there was a lot of miscellaneous questions. I don't know if I'm going to attribute these to the appropriate people, but I have some thoughts on some of the questions. One of them is around, the cost for this, and I think we're not comparing. We're asking to compare a counterfactual of a reality that doesn't exist. We actually don't know the cost of this future endeavor if it were to come to pass. But we do know the cost of our current status quo and our self-insurance fund. I think we've paid out like $72 million in recent times for some of those settlements. That's us, the taxpayers, basically paying that. So that's the cost right now. And I think it was Mayor Fry who said, we need to pay police more and we need to fire them more. And so, there could be a scenario in which we do offset, in the bargaining agreement, we offset the cost of this in a salary bump to try to keep it neutral as far as the impact on the staff. And then if that were to come to pass, I unfortunately have a lot of experience with the healthcare industry and healthcare insurance in particular. Some of these health companies have some of the most sophisticated data models on earth, and they can predict who will get cancer when and how much it'll cost to treat them. And then they rigorously fight against paying out costs for those to maximize their profits. That market, there is money to be made in this insurance market, and the way capitalism works is where there's money to be made, the market will follow. So and alternatively, if there's no money to be made, there will be no private insurance company that wants to take this business on, and then we'll continue in status quo. And if this amendment, it is not requesting that the state mandate self-insurance. It's just saying, let's remove that as a barrier and give it back to local control as to what makes the most sense for managing this risk. Would you rather pay out $72 million out of taxpayer funds to settle misconduct cases, or would you rather a private insurer, take a stab at developing some actuarial tables looking at national data of police conduct and police settlements and come up with an insurance premium rate that would stabilize the financial exposure of our taxpayers? So those are just some of my thoughts to some of the discussion that's kind of unfolded on the dais.
Thank you, Councilmember Payne. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I, quite frankly, am sick and tired of hearing in this council that all cops are terrible, racist, misogynist, horrible people. And I think the public that I represent, many of them are sick and tired of hearing that as well. Plenty of bad officers have left, some good officers have left, and there are plenty of good people on the job on a daily basis. And to constantly have them berated in these council chambers and told that they're misogynist, racist, horrible people is exactly the reason why many of them are leaving. So we better look internally at our own behavior about what we're doing to drive people out of working for the city of Minneapolis. The time has come to stop this performative behavior and characterizing every cop as terrible. I, for one, am sick of it. Number two, we're not asking snowplow drivers to have individual insurance. We're not asking tow truck drivers who work for the city to have individual insurance. We're not asking firefighters to do that. Are we simply saying some people are bad, therefore all of the other cops are going to have to pay for their own insurance? Insurance, which doesn't exist now on the market here or anywhere in the immediate area of Minnesota. And I'll note, insurance is really expensive for doctors. Ask doctors what malpractice insurance costs. Anesthesiologists are paying upwards of $100,000 a year. OBGYN's paying even more than that. So this actually could cost us more than what we're paying now to be self-insured. There's absolutely no analysis of it. So this seems to me like a political maneuver during an election year to try to get people on records, again, bashing cops. And quite frankly, I'm sick of it. The bill deadline is in 3 days. So clearly there's not going to be a bill drafted to make this change in 3 days. So the timing is really interesting to me. And quite frankly, what we're doing in this chambers is making it more difficult to recruit anyone to come here and work with the chief on procedural justice and correct policing by suggesting that everyone is bad and we need to make them carry their own insurance. There are plenty of good cops out there, and they don't need to sit and listen to this. And quite frankly, we shouldn't be either.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman. Councilmember Ellison.
I'm going to attempt to sort of take the temperature down a little bit just because I want us to think about the action that's actually in front of us. We are trying to tell the state legislature that we would support them in changing state law. There's no operational impact to that, none. There's no budget impact to that, none. There's no union contract impact to that, not inherently. So I just want us to think about the actual action in front of us. That's what we're considering. You know, I wasn't going to use the doctor's example, but if we're going to use the doctor's example, and doctors are insured, is the implication that all doctors are bad? That's not the implication by doctors being insured. So I don't think anybody's up here making that implication. As much as I respect Councilmember Goodman, I resent that that's my position. That's not my position. And so, but I do think that while there might be some settlements that we occasionally pay out for firefighters and snowplow drivers, how does it compare to the settlements that we pay out to police? I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it's a reasonable question. And I think that if we added up all the settlements that we've paid out in snowplow incidents and all the settlements that we've paid out for firefighters, it wouldn't come close to what we've paid out in police misconduct. I would invite any of my colleagues to correct me on that. This is the question before us. We're telling the state legislature that we would support them in a state law change. We don't have to pretend like this is anything other than that. We don't have to assign too much intent onto that and narrativize it in a way that is disingenuous. We can look at the question before us and we can answer it. And when Councilmember Wansley is talking about these reports, I don't think that Councilmember Wansley is saying every single cop is racist, misogynist. I think Councilmember Wansley is very clearly saying that we have feedback from MDHR, we have feedback, and we're anticipating feedback from the DOJ, although I don't want to speak for them, that this is the culture, not every single officer, that this is a pervasive culture and has been a pervasive culture within our department. That doesn't mean that every single cop is bad. I hope that officers can listen to this discussion with a clear mind. I could understand if they're struggling to, we're struggling to, right? we're making things up about what this action means. And understand that when you've got, I think, I don't have the numbers right in front of you, but I think Elliot said over 70 million in the last couple of years. If that's, that sounds accurate. I don't know for sure, but if that's accurate, then you've got to ask yourself, how much more expensive could it possibly get? And there's no reason to do an analysis if state law preempts us. So let's remove the state preemption. It doesn't lock us into anything. Let's do an analysis. Would this cost more than $72 million? And go from there. I think it's a reasonable action. I'm sorry that there's been so much debate. I really regret that there's been the tone, that the debate has had the tone that it's had.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Payne.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Yeah, I also just kind of wanted to cool the tone off a little bit. I don't think anybody said racist cop in any of this discussion, other than maybe your critique of this discussion. And I've made actually really.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Payne. If council members want to have a conversation, I'd ask them to please leave the dais momentarily. Thank you.
I've made really good connections with MPD now that I'm a council member, and we get to know these folks as people. And these are people that are trying to navigate a set of forces that are on them in this system, a set of incentives that are on them in this system. We ask a lot of MPD. We ask a lot of each and every one of our uniformed officers, and we actually demand certain things from them that are in contradiction. We demand them to be empathetic, but we don't give them the time in their calls to service. We demand that they have a very forceful, tough-on-crime approach to violence, but we don't let them run rampage. We don't want them to do that. There are these systems that are in place that inevitably lead to certain types of behavior because they are demanded to do certain things that are in contradiction to each other. We want them to stop every possible crime that there is, but we don't want them to pull people over. These are systems. These are incentives. And I think what we need to do is say, what are the different levers in the system? What are the different incentives in the system that will inevitably take any good character person and have them in a bad scenario? And I think going back to Councilmember Ellison's point, we're not actually saying we want to implement self-insurance or individual liability insurance for each officer. We're saying we don't want that mandated by the state, that we can't explore that. We want to look at the 70 some odd million dollars of costs that are carried by the taxpayer and ask, is there a different way to manage this type of risk? And right now, the answer to that question is no, because state law prevents us. I want the answer to that to be yes. And if we explore that and we find that self-insurance is really the most efficient way of managing that risk, we're going to continue insuring ourselves and paying out those payouts with taxpayer dollars. It's completely non-controversial to ask our state legislature to explore this as a potential for us. And it has nothing to do with disrespect for police officers.
Thank you, Council Member. Council President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I will be supporting this amendment today, not because I think all police officers are bad. I think that in our society, we have given two classes of people the responsibility of human life: doctors and police officers who have guns. And so consequently, those actions place them in a different level of responsibility in our society. And I believe that if we are asking doctors who have that same responsibility to have a level of coverage to help support when mistakes, accidents, or intentional behavior happens, because some doctors do intentionally harm people. However, and we don't have that same level of protection for our police officers who have that same responsibility to take people's lives. I think they would take that responsibility much more serious than we witness it being considered today. To the point that Councilmember Vital made about should we be supporting that, I think we do. I think police officers are underpaid now. And if we are going to ask them to spend extra money, we as a society should have to support that. But I believe that ultimately liability insurance would curb some of the unnecessary violence that we see played out not only in our city but all across the country.
Thank you, Council President. Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I don't like this comparison of doctors and police officers. Like, doctors aren't going out to 911 calls where people have weapons, possibly, or like there's violence happening at a scene. It's two different, like you go in to see a doctor. Sometimes it's elective surgery. Sometimes you need it to save your life. Like there's not a comparison in like police going out from a 911 call into a dangerous situation. Yes, they have a gun, but the other person can too. Like I don't know why we're comparing doctors and police officers. It just doesn't feel like a good comparison. I'm pretty sure there's probably a different profession that we can maybe, but the doctor thing, I'm not understanding the connection of the two, because they're like, yeah, they treat people, or they have like this, you know, they're a different kind of profession, but it just doesn't compare, because we don't ask doctors to take 911 calls and go out into dangerous situations. I feel like one of the gifts of, you know, like doctors, they have this passion to be a doctor, and they want to fix things, and and I'm sure there's a level of that with policing, but there's also a level of danger as a police officer that you go out with every single day when you start your shift. That is not the same of a doctor. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Chugtai.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to this point about why we're comparing police officers to doctors. I actually believe that comparison in this discussion was not brought in first by the council president, actually by Councilmember Goodman, who made the comparison of doctors carrying professional liability insurance with the specific example of anesthesiologists and the cost of personal liability insurance. So I think the comparison to doctors is just, I don't think it was the last comment by the council president that where the comparison to doctors and that profession was brought into this conversation.
Thank you, Council Member. I am not seeing any other discussion on this item, so we'll go ahead, and because it seems like there's division on this, I will ask for a roll call on this item as amended, and I say as amended because there's a substitute motion with just some technical changes to the language on this, but it contains all of the same substance as the original motion. And I'll also just note for the record that that was the case as well with item 2.1. So with that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll on item 2.2 as amended.
Councilmember Payne.
Aye.
Wansley.
Aye.
Vita.
No.
Ellison.
Aye.
Osman.
No.
Goodman.
No.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Chavez.
Aye.
Chugtai.
Aye.
Koski.
Nay.
Palmisano.
No.
Vice Chair Rainville.
No.
Chair Johnson.
No.
There are 6 ayes and 7 nays.
That motion fails. We will now move on to item 2.3, which is amending the legislative agenda and policy positions to reflect changes related to tuition-free higher education programs. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. So this amendment supports an existing piece of legislation that has been introduced by Senator Omar Fateh, which proposes using some of the state's $17 billion surplus to make higher education free in Minnesota. College debt, I think many of us, I'm sorry, can I be one mic? Thank you.
Yes.
College debt is a massive financial burden on so many residents. As a council member who represents the largest student population in the state, I see firsthand every day the need for this legislation, and I'm excited to support our Minneapolis delegation in bringing it forward and really addressing this massive burden on many working class students and residents. So with that, it's up for you all's consideration.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support Councilmember Wansley's amendment, but I did wanted to mention that invoking the name of Tina Erasmus as someone who supports item number 2 is not true. She's been texting me about this. She was happy to be notified, but she did not offer any support from her, the government relations team at the university, or the University of Minnesota. I strongly support item 1. I just wanted to clarify that I did not hear from the university that they support it. They appreciate being acknowledged in the conversation.
Can I offer clarification on that, Chair Johnson?
Councilmember, well, first off, thank you, Councilmember Goodman. Councilmember Wansley, and then we'll move to Councilmember Jenkins.
Just for clarifying on the record, I don't think at no point did I say the UDA. I think we said that we've touched base with the UDA about all of our amendments related to higher education. So sorry if there was anything that came off of like them being in support. I just said we did touch base with all the partners involved.
Thank you for the clarification, Councilmember Wansley. Council President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I'm curious, do we know the amount of money that Senator Fateh is suggesting?
Thank you for that question. I will look to Director Topinka or the author if they are able to answer that. And I see some typing and phones out, so this may take a moment, but thankfully, digital age, we should be able to hopefully come up with that pretty quickly.
And also, I can follow up. I see Director Topinka is doing her research on the bill language. I definitely defer to her. We also can follow up, again, knowing that this is a collaborative bill with Senator Fateh, the Minnesota Staff and Faculty Union. All the state colleges and universities are also rallying support for this. So there's been a broad base of, or broad coalition of higher ed faculty and staff and students that are rallying behind this legislation.
I think we may have an answer here.
Sorry,
No need to apologize, Director. There's a lot of bills at the legislature, and it takes a minute to get access to these things, so we certainly understand.
Okay. Yes, Chair Johnson and committee members, I did find the bill language. It's Senate File 1986, and it looks like the appropriation is $316 million, or close to $317 million in fiscal year 2025, and then moving forward. So it's about $317 million a year is the amount in the bill.
Thank you, Director.
Does it have a source for that ongoing, the general fund?
Chair Johnson, Council President, it's general fund appropriation is the source in the bill language.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Is there any other discussion on this item? I will just add myself to queue. I support this item. I do want to take a moment, though, just to say that we hear a lot about different free programs out there or pursuits of free things: college, childcare, healthcare, transit, housing, and even guaranteed universal basic income. And so my only point in raising this is I think we need to talk about prioritizing at some point around these. There is a finite limit to resources available, and so certainly this is something the legislature will need to consider around that, and as well as this body continues to support different supports within society, I think we want to be mindful of what are our priorities of those things mentioned, because I've heard of those other things that I've mentioned, those being priorities for council members as well. And so I think it would be helpful as a body and helpful in terms of our efforts around lobbying to have some prioritization of those things to say, well, which one do we want first? And essentially what kind of order around those. But again, I'm happy to support this item today. I do want to raise that as more of a future thinking ahead on these and how we prioritize. Councilmember Payne.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I actually want to build on that comment, and I agree we do need to have those priorities. And one thing that I'm just trying to bring into this conversation is, and this might not be relevant for the state of Minnesota specifically, but I'm sure we will find our own version of this in the state of Minnesota. But I look at, frankly, oligarchs like Elon Musk having enough free income to purchase platforms like Twitter as a reflection that our overall tax code is probably not reflective of the right set of priorities. So we know that there is capacity when it's very clear that Elon Musk owning Twitter is not like better for society, and that maybe those dollars would have been better spent, taxed, and used for something like higher education funding. So Elon Musk, his income is not really relevant for the state of Minnesota, but I'm sure there's a version of that type of wealth in our state that maybe could be better utilized for some of these types of programs. So,
Thank you, Councilmember Payne. Councilmember Wansley.
Yeah, building on this discussion around prioritization, it might be good for this body or the IGR staff to also have a series of meetings with our Minneapolis delegation, because I will name the things that you highlighted, a drive for universal health care, legalization of cannabis, and then ensuring that expungement and decriminalization efforts are complemented with that legislation, free higher education, free childcare, all of these things about rebuilding and fully funding our public assets and public institutions are being driven by the Minneapolis delegation. They see these as priorities. They are being responsive to many of the concerns that their residents are expressing to them about their material needs, and these are legislative solutions that they're co-creating with residents. That's what we're seeing happening with the trifecta of this being one of the most progressive agendas that we've seen pass for a state in the 21st century. We're leading the way on that in the country. And I want to give credit to our Minneapolis delegation in the House and in the Senate for being a driving force for those changes. So it could be having a conversation with our Minneapolis delegation. I know many of us have very, different relationships with those representatives. And that can also be a resource in helping us really assess where are their alignments around some of the priorities that they're organizing around with our residents and ways that we can support, and what are some of the gaps that might need to be filled. So just offering that as also another suggestion.
Thank you, Councilmember. I'm not seeing anyone else in queue, so we will move to a voice vote on item 2.3. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed say nay, and the motion carries. Now we will move on to item 2.4, and I will see if the author wants to speak on that or if anyone jumps in the queue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We adopted our legislative agenda last December, and largely speaking, I feel like we need to go with what we've got, or it reduces our effectiveness at the Capitol. But this is something that you've seen increased activity around the past few months from the federal to the local levels. And to the extent that we can connect things that we're doing here to the state, I have the next two items. I want you to know my amendments today come from a place of sadness. I sat with our experience at council last cycle for several days, and reflected on the change to meeting decorum over the years and how our public officials, public employees, and their families are being treated. I spoke with colleagues who filed police reports. I spoke to a colleague who was pinned to the top of an escalator after that meeting. Council President Jenkins and I are not done hearing from you. We've been in conversation with city staff, building staff, and the mayor's office on potential next steps on what we do internally here to help manage our meetings better. But I suggest that we all come together and not remain silent, but agree to no longer tolerate this. The council president and I will continue to hear your feedback, and we have our own work to do clearly. In the meantime, and in exploration of our options, I feel it's important to add to our legislative agenda a couple of items that could help us, as well as other municipalities, clarify two things. The first one is about conduct in public meetings. The second one is about threats to the safety of public officials. So these two have been prepared by the city attorneys and are before you. I've had an opportunity to speak over the weekend with some of the state legislators that have introduced things like this in the past and that have some different flavors of this moving already in bills through the House. My First Amendment asks for clear guidance from the state legislature as to lawful meeting conduct per the open meeting law. There is no state law we know of for interrupting the democratic process. This speaks very much about disruption of a body's meeting, and I believe in peaceful protest, but I do not believe that what happened in this chamber 2 weeks ago was peaceful. Right now, the only tool in our toolbox is to recess. We can't remove people, but we really need to dissuade bad behavior here. So this statement asks the state legislature to help define boundaries to let both protest and meetings coexist in the same place. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Vice President. Is there any additional discussion on this item? Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I just had a couple clarifying questions for the author. So from my understanding, our legislative agenda shows, support for things that we cannot change at the municipal level because there's legislative, barriers at the state. That's what some of my amendments were also attempting to address. So Council Vice President, can you help me understand what are some of the current barriers at the state level as it relates to open meeting laws that are preventing, action from being taken by the city? I know you mentioned some pieces around, dissuading certain behaviors and things of that nature. Just trying to get a sense of what are some of the gaps in our current open meeting laws at the state level that this will help address.
If I may, Mr. Chair, I'm actually going to ask our city attorney because I'm not an expert on the law, but we've had extensive conversation about how and where to best situate this as a legislative priority.
Council President, Chair Johnson, council members. So there really are not a lot of tools in our toolbox at the local level to prevent behavior that is intended to and does prevent the body from doing its job. So because we don't have those penalties or frameworks at the local level, looking to the state level to, there are a couple of different options. One is to add something to the criminal code that would that criminalize disruptive behavior. There actually is a state law on disorderly conduct in meetings that was frankly found to be unconstitutional by the Minnesota Supreme Court because it's way too broad. So one of our options is to ask for state legislation that actually corrects that and does the right balance between free speech on one hand and the ability for public bodies to continue doing their business. And then the second option is the open meeting law itself, creating some sort of whether it be civil penalties or whether it be just simply instructions in the open meeting law that, again, does that balance between First Amendment protected activity on one hand and on the other hand, allows for the conduct of meetings without disruption, so that an elected body or even another public body can do its business, do the public's business without interruption. Because the open meeting law is a state law, it makes a lot of sense to me that some of this, some of these strictures could actually fit very well in the open meeting law, so it's a very clear, allowance for that open process, and also allows for, again, there's kind of that give and take between expressive activity and letting the governing body do its job.
I have one more question, either for the author or our staff. So also this amendment includes language that describes safeguarding the First Amendment rights. Can the author or staff share if Civil Rights or the Race and Equity, Inclusion and Belonging Department, were they consulted in or asked for guidance on this amendment, as well in terms of the language? Because, conduct, and I will name this, this is documented too, so you can go on our YouTube, but conduct and decorum in this space has often been weaponized against people of color. So I want to make sure that this practice also isn't used here. So can you share if our, departments that are guided with making sure that we are not crossing that line has been consulted in this language?
Mr. Chair, I will take that. This is a legislative priority, so that we're not at the point of enacting changes at the city level. When we do that, I would absolutely expect that we would want those different departments consulted. This is just stating an ask for the legislature to clearly define open meeting law and the times and ways in which it could be closed.
I understand that, Council Vice President. And I will name, for instance, one of my amendments, agenda set it, you named wanting me to seek out guidance from Rashida, our labor negotiation staff, and just considering and providing feedback on our language. This seems like this will also be relevant to the work that our Race and Equity and Belonging Department, as well as Civil Rights, what they do currently. So it would make sense, to want them to have eyes on this language too, because I know we're often encouraged to seek out advice from departments too, even with language like what we brought forward today. But I'm understanding you did not do that.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, no, we are not there yet. And that's just as fast as we've been able to get this together in a little bit more than a week. I don't, again, see why this would be, I think we're conflating two things here. This doesn't have an impact on our labor partners in terms of what their contracts would be, so I don't know how that would impact labor negotiations, except that we have received support from the Board of Business Agents and from the building trades, and I have spoken with our AFSCME representative, all whom support both of these kinds of additional elements that we put in place, because our workers are compelled to be here out on the dais when we are here out on the dais. And this seems like it becomes absolutely a fairness issue.
And just clarification on that, I brought up the labor piece because my amendment also tied to the police contract, or that was raised. So because of that, I was encouraged to seek out additional feedback or guidance from the relevant department that will be holding that piece. Because we are trying to do things around open meeting laws that, again, the concern here that might have unintended consequences, especially in dealing with First Amendment rights, those are often dealt with our departments like Race, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging, and Civil Rights. So I would just assume, just like I've been encouraged to seek out guidance from other departments that have relevance to the language or the legislation that I'm trying to bring forward, those seem like two departments that also could have been consulted as well. And I'm hearing that did not happen in the rationale for why, but that's why I asked.
Thank you, Councilmember Payne.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Yeah, I'm going to try to remember what I got in queue about. I had questions that were follow-ups from the attorney. You mentioned that we don't have a lot of tools in our toolbox. So my first question is, do we not have those tools because we haven't passed them as a body, or do we not have those tools because we are preempted by state law to pass those types of tools. And then my other question was, it sounds like the exact intent of this was implemented in state law and was found to be unconstitutional, and I'm trying to wrap my head around what version of this would pass that test, and I don't know if I'm envisioning that correctly right now.
City Attorney?
Chair Johnson, council members, so in terms of your first question, the tools in the toolbox, in terms of a criminal statute, that is something that the city could adopt by ordinance. Obviously, it would be a petty misdemeanor, a misdemeanor level offense. In terms of making a change to the open meeting law, obviously, that is a state law. That has to come at the state level. Your second question with regard to constitutionality, the reason why that statute, it's a criminal disturbance statute. The reason why it was found unconstitutional is because it was drafted really, really broadly, and it didn't have an intent element. It didn't, these laws have to be narrowly tailored. These laws exist in many, many different places in the country, and most of which are lawful. They have to be crafted so that, again, they're not targeted at speech, they're targeted at intentional conduct done for the purpose of disrupting a meeting. So it is very possible to craft a statute that would be fully constitutional. And obviously, if this passes, our office would work on crafting such a statute. But, I'm not going to say that it's always easy to craft statutes, but this is one that we've got lots of guidance all over the country of statutes that have been upheld as constitutional.
I have to say that I have a lot of questions about this as it relates to the First Amendment, and I definitely think that we should be pursuing what we have the control over and kind of maximizing the impact that we can have with our local control on this issue. But I see a lot of other folks in queue, and I'm really open to this discussion. So,
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I want to thank you, Council Vice President, for bringing this forward. As you acknowledged earlier, that last meeting, it was rough. It was hard. Some of us really took a lot of abuse in that meeting in a way that I probably had never imagined before, and I consider myself pretty tough. I don't scare easy, but there was some things that happened in that meeting that scared me, and then later on that scared my team and I, being trapped at the top of a 2-story escalator. And so thank you, for bringing this forward. And also I want to say thank you for acknowledging the staff in this, because I've heard so much from staff about how they're treated. Recently, an employee had their tires all cut up because they were giving a ticket to someone in my ward. A public works truck was set on fire recently. There's been these attacks. Some staff have had their phone numbers and addresses put out publicly. So I really want to thank you for acknowledging this, and I hope everyone supports this. Last year, a couple of my colleagues, one, felt they were being bullied on Twitter and reached out to me because they thought I knew the person that was bullying them and asked me to call these people and ask them to stop. And I did that. I took that serious. Twitter doesn't bother me, but it clearly bothered my colleague. And so I took that serious. I reached out to that person. Another incident with a different colleague, someone was calling. I felt like he was harmless. It was just a phone call. But my colleague didn't feel they were harmless. They alerted security and others at the state that this person, was seeking help in a certain type of way and thought it become a dangerous situation. I didn't feel in danger at all. I just thought it was a person who was, passionate about what they wanted to see happen around legislation with children being molested. And this person was very passionate. And, my colleague was like, wow, what's happening? I need to let security know, and I need to let people at the state know that this person is reaching out in this way. And I took that serious, So I want us all to take serious that safety may be different for all of us. What happens on Twitter may scare some, it may not scare others. But to have threats, to you and your family in public, in your face, like that you hear, to be trapped on the escalator, that affects me. It might not affect you, but support me and, how I want to feel safe, because I'm always going to, I don't care what differences I have with my colleagues, I'm always going to support their safety and whatever that looks like for them. It may not be the same for me, but it is important to me as a person to support my colleagues' safety in whatever that is, and I want people to do the same for me. So thank you so much, Vice President and President Jenkins, for really seeing the opportunity for us to reclaim our safety is what I feel like. Not only ours, but the entire city enterprise. So thank you both for this.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Vita. Councilmember Chugtai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, I want to start with reaffirming the intent behind this discussion. Nobody on this dais, no public official, no public employee deserves to have their safety violated. We are doing the work of, we are doing the business of the people, and we have different ways of approaching it and different ways of making meaning of that. And that disagreement is okay. It's healthy. It's what results in better policymaking. It's the beauty of democracy. And nobody deserves to feel threatened or to be victim to violence or abuse in our jobs. I think that deserves to be said over and over again. Again, appreciate the intent of the items brought forward. I want to actually just focus right now, since we're taking these items one by one, on item 2.4, the one that where the city of Minneapolis is supporting legislation that would create clear guidance for lawful conduct at public meetings of government bodies subject to the open meeting law. So I see this item as something that would not just impact the city of Minneapolis, but would impact all local bodies of government that are also subject to the open meeting law. And to whether it's the author that wants to take this question or Director Topinka, have we talked to other partners like the League of Minnesota Cities about the impact this would have on local control? I know in previous items that I've ever talked with our IGR team about bringing forward, one of the first questions I've always been asked is like, have you asked the League of Minnesota Cities and have we consulted with other partners about the impact it would have on them?
Director Topinka or the author?
I can go ahead and field that. I haven't, as I spoke with Councilmember Chugtai this morning, and we had a really good conversation. We have not yet had a meeting with League of Minnesota Cities to talk about this effort, but I think that what I appreciate about Councilmember Chugtai's, from our conversation at least, is that she sees this as removing local control, and I see this as gaining more ability for local control. So I see us as being able to have in state law, as the city attorney was explaining to Councilmember Payne and the rest of us, how to narrowly define something that different municipalities could make different choices and operate within those boundaries. But today, that is fraught because there is very limited state law and then just case law, like a lawsuit that makes everybody scared of it. So to me, this enhances local control. I appreciate and respect that you see it the opposite.
Yeah, no, and just want to clarify, like I had a really good conversation with the council vice president this morning about the items that she was bringing forward that are in front of us right now. So I think I'm really interested in how this conversation is going to unfold. I see a number of our colleagues in queue. I imagine more will get in queue as well. I'm struggling with this item in like a couple of different ways. One, I see the point that I believe Councilmember Goodman made earlier about the first the first bill deadline being 3 days away right now, and unless the item is already scheduled to be coming up, it's not going to happen this year. It's going to happen next year. And so, if we know that an item like this type of legislation wouldn't be brought up until next year anyway, why wouldn't we take the opportunity then to wait until next year, when we pass our legislative agenda again, when we go through that long process, and use the time between now and then to move a lot more thoughtfully with our partners, to think more creatively about the solutions and the tools that are available to us right now within open meeting law, and why would we not do that work now instead of moving something that is reactive and hasn't fully checked all of the boxes yet? That's like one concern I have. And then I think the second piece is I think most of the discussion and conversation I've heard so far has been about lawful conduct, right? That's the exact language used here for meetings subject to open meeting law, as the conduct of participants, the public, when they come to public meetings. I don't think we've accounted for the lawful conduct of us as elected officials in this equation. So examples that came to mind for me right away when I was thinking about this was the city of Minneapolis is rare for a city that we don't have an open public comment period at every single committee and council meeting. Asking for this type of clarity and guidance might result in us being mandated to include that in every single council and committee meeting. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I think the public being able to have their voices heard is a good thing. I'm just saying that's an unintended consequence that I don't think we've fully thought through yet. Another example was around, the people that are going to be making these laws. They're going to be thinking about their current conditions. So as an example, the Senate has really specific rules about how members conduct themselves, including how they dress. Every member is required to cover their shoulders, wear closed-toed shoes. Men are required to wear a suit and tie. If a member walks into the chambers wearing a jacket or a blazer, they're not allowed to take that item off. Members can vote on behalf of each other. We don't do that type of work here. So I think the unintended consequence of how is this going to impact how we as a body can conduct ourselves hasn't been thought through. And so bill deadline being in 3 days, lots of unanswered questions leads me to let's slow down and let's pick this item back up in a more thoughtful way. That's where I'm at right now, but interested to hear where other colleagues are landing.
Thank you, Councilmember Chugtai. Councilmember Vice Chair Rainville.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I was one of those people who were threatened, bullied, intimidated. All of us on that end of the dais down there, Councilmember Vitale's left and Goodman, but I see you. Thank you, Lisa. Councilmember Koski's children were threatened. This is not acceptable. You can fine tune and think of a reason to not move this forward, but as colleagues, we cannot allow each other to be bullied and intimidated and threatened. So a vote today, we should have a 13-0 vote on this. We need to go on the record that we need protection. We need decorum here. Please, please vote for this. And by the way, I find it very interesting that those who have objections have yet to come and give sympathy to us who have been bullied and threatened and intimidated.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Ellison.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I was largely undecided on this item because I did have a few questions. I'll admit that I think Councilmember Rainville's comments may have persuaded me to a no on this item. I just wanted to talk about something that I don't often talk about because for very personal reasons. But during 2020, a lot of us were experiencing a lot of threats. A lot of us experienced, mostly digital threats online. And I in my capacity, experienced a number of threats that were physical that didn't stay online. They didn't remain in emails or DMs or social media. I had a neighbor tell me that they found a dud, luckily, a dud incendiary device near my back door. I had the FBI come and collect a letter that had been sent to my house. And these are things that I don't like to talk about because another thing that happened was that colleagues who did receive very credible threats took it upon themselves to get security for themselves. And they were royally mocked by the media, by folks in the public, and I feel like some were mocked by members of the body. I didn't accept security because I kind of anticipated that would be the reaction, that those threats would be kind of brushed off. And that if you took political positions that were not supported by the institution or by the body, and you received threats, that was just sort of on you. And maybe it's my mistake for having sort of accepted that as my reality. I became familiar with my Second Amendment rights, Castle Doctrine, weapon security, all that kind of stuff. Just kind of felt like you kind of had to take it. And so I look at an incident like this, and I kind of think, well, what's different about this? And there might need to be a broader conversation about safety that doesn't just play into whether or not the people who were threatened possess a certain level of likability or not. And that's what this feels like, I'm being honest. It feels like the folks who were threatened last term didn't possess the same level of likability, and folks who are being threatened now possess an increased level of likability, and now we have to force a conversation about safety, and we got to take it all the way to the state. And I'm happy to have a conversation about safety. And I think that there have been a lot of credible threats, and I think there have been a lot of champions on this dais, the council president being one of them, who have named a number of ways in which they've been threatened and feel unsafe in this space. But by and large, we've never seen a conversation about safety kind of been brought to this level. And I feel like I've certainly never been a part of those discussions and have been largely asked to sort of just take it on the chin. And it is what it is. And again, it really left an impact to see my colleagues who received security after receiving credible threats be, by my estimation, mocked for doing so. And so, yeah, I don't know what's changed here. And I would like to know what our options are before we are potentially changing open meeting laws. What happens in those jurisdictions, if this is a state law change, what happens in those jurisdictions where they are going to push the boundaries of violating people's First Amendment rights? Maybe we trust ourselves here to not do that. But what happens in those municipalities and in those school districts where there's a lot less hesitation to violate people's First Amendment rights? I think that there does need to be a little bit more discussion about what exactly we're asking the state to do. And there are things that have happened to members of this body that are absolutely unacceptable. Some of them are criminal. There's a pathway to resolving a crime that's been committed against you. And so I don't know why we would take extra steps in this way. The one thing I do appreciate is that employees are included here, because I do know that some of our housing inspectors, as well as others, do experience a certain level of unsafety. And that's another thing that I feel like has been a conversation among department leadership, but not necessarily a conversation that we have leaned into enough here locally. And yet now here we are taking this issue to the state. I'm really interested in knowing what we can do locally. I'm really interested in understanding, exactly what we're asking the state to change before I can support something like this. So a little bit of vulnerability, just kind of sort of shared some of that of my personal experience with threats and what I feel like has been a real unserious conversation in the past about threats. And so those are the reasons that I feel like I'm not going to be supporting this item today. And happy to answer any questions, but that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Council Member Ellison. I will note that we've got 4 additional council members in queue, and just a reminder to colleagues, we have 3 presentations today as well on this and 1 more consent item. So I would be mindful of that, colleagues. Thank you. Council Member Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to try to get away from the politics here. All of the public should have the benefit of being able to see what's going on. And we are literally elected by the public to be that check, to do the business of our local government. And if people interrupt our meetings and prevent us from being able to get government business done, they're also preventing people from being able to see that work. This is not about shutting anyone down. It is about letting government work. I had that anecdote in my notes about colleagues from our previous council and getting to the point of needing personal security, and I appreciate Councilmember Ellison bringing that up. I think that instead of, as individuals, we all trying to figure out and navigate with our loved ones and other members of our household how to navigate this individually, these 2 things are things we could do collectively. I need to comment on a letter that we all received last night. We all received a letter citing objections that conflated what we're doing here with these goals. The writers objected to us criminalizing freedom of speech and the right of protest, and this in no way do either of these amendments do that. Both of these are about clarifying our ability to do our work and keep everyone safe while also allowing protesters to exercise First Amendment rights. These are not mutually exclusive. We are not criminalizing protest. We are stopping people from stopping us from doing our work. And that is exactly what happened at the last council meeting. And how does that benefit anyone here? It doesn't. We've seen, as of late, things that are not peaceful protest. It crosses a line. But I think we need to figure out and ask the state to define what is that line. And then we can create, in a fulsome way that makes sense for our city, boundaries around that. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Goodman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support the efforts of Councilmember Palmisano because it sadly has gotten to this point. And I want us to reflect on the fact that in my 25 years of being in office, this is really only in recent times have we had a situation where council members don't stand up for council members where they agree or disagree when there are threats against them. And the silence after the last council meeting in terms of those who had been attacked by those who had egged on the attacks was deafening. Not one person on the council, other than those of us that have been attacked, came to me and said, I'm sorry that they behaved that way. I don't think it's a legitimate threat. Don't worry, but you shouldn't be treated like that. In all the years I've been on the council members have understood that there's only 13 of us, that we all share a very common situation, and that when one of us is attacked, any of us is attacked. In the last group of people on the council president had someone come to her house while her small children were in the building, and someone dumped concrete on her front porch. And we all condemned that, privately and publicly. We felt that that was out of line, and it was. And in the last group, when I shared with Councilmember Ellison that people were coming to my house, knocking on my door, putting things in my lawn, threatening and yelling at me, do you know what he did? He stood up for me. He told me, I will come to your house if I have to stay there. I will. I'm not going to put you in a situation where you feel unsafe. And it feels like we have disintegrated into having common goals about how people can be treated, and one side of all of us being in the same situation has turned into 2 sides. And that is super sad and frustrating. I was here for the meeting. I was threatened by people who were threatened. I didn't file a police report because I felt it would further escalate the situation, not because I felt it would calm down the situation. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. I was not attacked the way Councilmember Vito was, but I was in the same restaurant 10 minutes before, And so were the people who went after Councilmember Vita, and they didn't come after me, thankfully, at that moment. They waited 10 minutes and went after her. When something bad happens to any one of us, even if you disagree with it, I think it's just collegial and emotional and important that we stand up for each other. And I also, don't want to have hard feelings between people that we work with. But we've been unable to have a conversation where those that have not been attacked because they're on the side of the audience stand up in any way, shape, or form for those of us who don't. And that's probably why we're at this point. And I would just ask us to each reflect internally about what you could do to stand up for someone who maybe doesn't agree with you on 1 vote or 20 votes and say that behavior is bad all around. We can agree to disagree on the issues, but we cannot agree to disagree that some of us should be threatened for how we're trying to do the job. I think this gets us part of the way there. I think it would be better if we could agree that that kind of behavior is not going to be acceptable by any one of us. But we're not at that point. Not one of you on this, I guess not the prevailing side, not one person said anything to me. That makes me feel like you think that that behavior is okay. I'm just trying to be vulnerable and honest. I don't actually believe that from Councilmember Ellison because he's been to my house and he's stood up to protect me. And I didn't have private security because I felt like that was escalating the situation. So I would just have us think about the fact that we could treat each other better during these times of intensity. We don't need to amp it up. We need to hold the hand emotionally, physically or otherwise, of each other and understand that we all are trying to do the same job for a similar reason, because we want to see the city move forward. And if we don't agree on how to get there, let's at least agree that any one of us being attacked is all of us being attacked.
Thank you, Councilmember. Council President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I'm going to try to be brief. I will be supporting this today. I came to this council in 2018 when I was sworn in, demanding we have more security in this building, not because of any actions that anybody had taken, but because of the fact that we are making decisions each and every day that make some people very upset and some people happy. In our society, for whatever reasons, people have decided when their opinions are not supported, they turn violent. That's what we have been witnessing throughout my term in office, and it is continuously getting more and more amped up, dangerous, and frightening. And it is literally impeding our ability to do the work that we were elected to do. And so I am supporting this. This is not the only measure that we will be taking to try to improve safety, decorum, and our ability to do our jobs on behalf of the residents of Minneapolis, but it's one of them that I believe we have to take. And I do believe that Councilmember Rainville's comments that this should be a unanimous vote on this council, that we have the ability to come here and do the work that the people elected all of us to do, should be utmost importance to everybody on this body. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Councilmember Chavez.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I want to begin by saying that no elected official, their family, or loved one should ever have to face death threats or physical violence, and that no one in this body will ever wish any harm to any of you. And I will always stand against any of this behavior to any of my colleagues, and myself included. This behavior is unacceptable and not okay, and I do agree with Councilmember Goodman that no one should be attacked. Protecting the First Amendment right is important, so I'm glad that this is included. And I think it's important that our communities know the guidance of public meetings so they are accessible and easy to follow. It's also important and just and maybe even more important that elected officials also know the lawful guidance that they must follow when they interact with the public. So I'm glad that this is included in that. And I will say this, the City Council already unanimously voted to support our public employees. So part of this amendment, the second one that we're gonna touch base later, is pretty misleading and redundant. We got an email from the Minneapolis Building and Construction Trades Council last night asking us to support our employees. And to that email, I will say that the City Council unanimously voted in approval of that in November in our IGR agenda. That is not what this is about. We approved that in November. And I'll say this is a touchy topic. I personally have received many death threats, statements of people knowing where I am and where my family is, and my family and loved ones being reported to Immigration and Customs Enforcement. This is not behavior that is okay. This is not behavior that is going to be diminished to Twitter only. It's not Twitter behavior. Councilmember Utah, that's not just Twitter behavior, that is threats to my family and loved ones too. And I have yet to receive any help from council leadership or the city government when my own people and my own community members and my own family have been reported to Immigration Customs Enforcement. And I can't even block my harassers because I'm going to receive an ethics complaint from the city government. So I hope that when that time comes and that my own family and loved ones are impacted, that city leadership and the city government is actually going to stand up for my community and my loved ones as well, because I have heard nothing of sort. I don't understand why we need help from our state government when we should be doing safety in our own jurisdiction right here, right now. I hope that our council leadership is willing to stand up for the safety of all of our colleagues right here and do what is needed in our own jurisdiction, because every single one of us believe that we deserve to be safe. And I'll end it with this. I cannot sit here in good conscience while the indigenous people, the native people of my ward, are being called dangerous, criminals, violent, and by some members of this dais, insurrectionists, compared to January 6th. I will not tolerate that. We can have healthy dialogue without stereotyping people of color, and we can have conversations about safety without disproportionately incarcerating communities of color. I had some questions for the city attorney, but it seems like this council, this body, this administration already has power to address the safety of our colleagues in our own jurisdiction. I'll ask some questions for our city clerk, if you can help us get some guidance. Do we have any guidelines for our city council meetings currently right now?
Councilmember Chavez, I think I would have to defer that to Casey Carl, who is not here right now.
Thank you so much, I appreciate it. I would hope that as we continue to deliberate this, that we can figure out if we have any current guidelines that we have to follow in our city council meetings. And if not, how are we going to decide what those guidelines are? How are we going to make sure that the public is involved in these guidelines so they understand how they can get involved and what the guidelines are? I think it's important that both we as elected officials and the public understand what these guidelines are and how we communicate these guidelines. We know, as a council member that represents the most racially diverse ward in the city of Minneapolis, guidelines aren't meant for my community to understand and learn. And then I have I'll have two questions if the Council Vice President will yield. Council Vice President, as you know, the policy deadline, and Councilman Chuck Tai alluded to this earlier, is Friday. I expect this will pass on Thursday. Have you talked to any state representatives, any state legislators, anybody in our own delegation about who is going to carry this legislation, what they're going to do to address it?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Chavez, you know the state better than I do. You've had more experience there. But it is important to note that I had conversation over the weekend with Representative Zach Stevenson. He said he's interested in revamping his old bill from last year and having it be modified. He's very busy on the cannabis and the sports betting legislation, but he's open to other authors. He also suggested that Representative Becker-Finn and Representative Greenman, who both have things moving, and could be approached to be more inclusive in their language, to just add components of this on, that might also be a path. I wanted to wait until the end of this meeting or the end of this vote to see where things lie, to see what the will is of our body, right? I don't go there as an individual to our state legislature. Before calling back Majority Leader Jamie Long, who I also spoke with, and said that he'd be interested in finding another author for a revamp that might have some of these elements in Representative Stevenson's bill, because he does have so much on his plate. So that's the extent of my conversations at the Capitol.
Thank you, Council Vice President. And the last one is, should this pass the state legislature, do you have any plans to co-create guidelines with the public, the people that actually come to our meetings, to make sure that they aren't being left behind? We know that City Hall, based on actions that our city government has taken over the past years, centuries, decades, has traditionally kept communities of color and immigrants out. Do you have a plan, should this pass the state legislature, to bring communities of color or immigrant communities, people that speak different languages, into co-creating a guideline that isn't pushing people out when this place is not safe for communities of color to begin with?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Chavez, absolutely. I anticipate that elements of this policy position could get incorporated into some existing bills if that happens for this year. If that doesn't, then we could work on this in a different kind of way, perhaps next year. Once that happens, it is absolutely important to keep welcoming people into our council chambers. I think that the makeup of our current body reflects the kind of diversity that we have in our city, and who we want to see before us as being at the table, helping us make those decisions, and I seek to do that in every way.
Thank you, Council Vice President. And my last one is to the IGR team. Does the IGR team, Director Topinka, have any thoughts on both of these amendments? And have you been able to talk to our Minneapolis delegation about what their appetite is?
Director Topinka.
Chair Johnson, Councilmember Chavez, committee members, we have not yet engaged in conversations with the delegation because this is not something that has yet been approved by the council. If it is, our intention would be to follow up on some of the ways that Council Vice President has mentioned with some of the bills that are already moving. As has been noted here a couple of times today, the first committee deadline is this Friday, and so getting a brand new bill introduced and in before deadline on any topic at this point is going to be very challenging, and so it likely would need to be looking at things that are already moving if there was going to be something done this year. But again, we are waiting for the council to act before we take any next steps.
Thank you, Director Topinka. And Chair Johnson, I'll just end with this. As I stated earlier, the violence and harm that has been felt to my colleagues is unacceptable, and I will always stand against that. And I will make it clear that this body unanimously voted 13-0 to support our public employees already. So I want to make sure the public understands that the council unanimously stood with our employees already. This may be a little misleading. I appreciate that public employees are included in that, but that vote was taken in November, so I don't want people to forget that that vote was taken when we approved our legislative agenda in IGR in November.
Thank you, Councilmember Chavez. Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I want to say, I don't shy away from conversations. I love talking to people. It's just not my thing to not talk to someone. And the people who were here threatening us last week never tried to have a conversation with me or my office in between what happened at the last council meeting and before that. So to be sitting in this very seat and be threatened, and my family, even my dog was threatened, to go through that with people who never even tried to meet with me, I can't support that. If I had denied folks a meeting and this was the only way they felt like they could talk to me and talk to me is what needs to happen. We should talk and listen to one another. That is not what was happening here. There was no conversation. It was just threats. It was threatening. It was unsafe, and that's not what happened. And, to Councilmember Ellison, I'm sorry that, no one took this serious last term. I wasn't here. I can't speak to why people didn't, but you have an opportunity to support your colleagues in taking it serious right now. I don't know why people got security or did whatever they did. But right now, we're trying to work on something that is suitable for all of us, the existing council. Maybe the next council comes along and changes it to something different. I don't know. And I also don't think it really hurt my feelings, Councilmember Ellison, when you said it's because we're more likable. You know me better than that. That's just not cool at all for somebody who I respect and like to say something like that. It's not because we're likable. It's because we're not scared of political blowback for getting protection for ourselves or for having a conversation around we're not going to be harassed by people or treated a certain way and have our families threatened, our children and our pets and our husbands and wives threatened. It's not because I'm more likable. It's because I'm willing to make a police report and I'm willing to stand up and say, I'm not going to tolerate this because I'm serving the wonderful people of Ward 4. So that hurt. I don't like it. I respect you way more than that. And please don't ever do that to me again.
Would just remind council members of decorum on this dais.
Well, you let them say it.
So we are not going to reference others in that kind of way. Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Councilmember Goodman, I really appreciate your remarks. Your maturity and wisdom will sorely be missed. So thank you for sticking up. And again, Council President Jenkins, thank you for acknowledging my comment that this should be a 13-0 vote. This is a watershed vote here. Let's start to do the business of the people and take control of this body. Thank you.
Thank you, council member. And I put myself in queue to speak on this item. First, I want to say it's inexcusable what happened, and I'm sorry to my colleagues for the threats they've faced. I've faced those threats too over the years, and it's not right. I take these concerns very seriously, and I think that these ongoing threats are harmful to democracy. It makes it very difficult for people to step up and run for office when they're getting threatened. And I really see that reflected in item 2.5, which we'll be speaking on next. I also want to note that I'm a part of the League of Minnesota Cities, and I'll note that cities are struggling with this across the state with their meetings. And if you go out and you search news articles for it, you will see that there have been council meetings and school board meetings that have been shut down by those that are opposed to Black Lives Matter, that are opposed to trans youth and LGBTQ actions at these various meetings. They're opposed to race equity. They have shut down meetings over masks and vaccines. There have been white supremacists and Proud Boys that doxed one school board chair. And so this is a widespread problem in the state. At the same time, I go out and I look at the League of Minnesota Cities' own guidance for councils. And under maintaining order, they say, well, council meetings must be open to the public. No one who is noisy or unruly has a right to remain in the council chambers. When the council decides that a disorderly person should not remain in the meeting hall, the police may be called to execute the orders of the presiding officer or the council. We do have tools in place today to remove disruptive people from our meetings. And so because we have those tools, because of the timeline around the deadlines over at the legislature, I am not going to be supporting this motion today. I do support more work on this as the city's appointee to the League of Minnesota Cities. I am happy to continue working with our partners across the state on solutions related to this so that there is clear guidance for councils and that it's clear that councils and school boards know what their tools are in the toolbox to address concerns around conduct at their meetings. Because right now it seems like there's a broad array of approaches. I'll even note if you go out and look, there's councils in cities in our state that post clear guidance, even saying things like you can't use profanity at your meetings, and put a lot of stipulations in place. And so I would support more work on this. I'm thankful to the author for thinking about this. I also think the language right now is broad, and we still have more work we can do to define this, and I think that's best done with partner jurisdictions as well. So with that, those are my comments. I'll recognize Councilmember Payne.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Yeah, I was just really trying to take in this whole conversation. I had those kind of First Amendment questions, but I was really receptive to how this dialogue would unfold. I was able to have a little side conversation with our city attorney around what the process might look like in the legislature, given these timelines. And I was wavering until you just, you made that point, and we do have tools here to keep us safe, and I don't think we're fully utilizing those right now. I had requested a closed session to talk about building security around the budget timeline to see if there was something that we could do there. I think there's a lot left undone that's within our control that I think could really meaningfully impact our safety. I also want to apologize to my colleagues. If I didn't appropriately speak to the events that happened and how that impacted you, that's a failing on my part, and I really do deeply care about your safety. I mean, my name was the first name on the list. This is the, yay, I'm Ward 1, but sometimes the result of that is you're the first name on the bomb threat list with your address. So this profoundly impacts me too. My wife did not sign up for this at all. This is not something she supports me deeply in this work, but this has brought a lot of hardship on our life. And I think we have some tools that we should really be looking into right now that can keep us safe, and that we should be exploring those tools. And I think that the reality is we're going to have to spend the next year with the legislature after this deadline drafting up language. It's probably not going to come in at this term, and I think that we should maybe get our house in order a little bit more. So thank you for your comments, Chair Johnson.
Thank you, Councilmember Payne. Councilmember Ellison.
Yeah, just wanted to almost echo. I didn't know what Councilmember Payne was going to say, but I kind of want to echo those sentiments around. I've never been afraid to defend colleagues when conduct has been inappropriate, and I do. I've been kind of inactive in the media and on social media, and so I haven't had a formal statement, but I do want to acknowledge that a lot of my colleagues face some inappropriate conduct. I also want to say that when we're up on this dais trying to run a meeting, we're not up here alone. Our security staff were on the other side of this rope, and they were doing their best to maintain decorum, and they faced a lot of, not a lot, but a number of them faced some vitriolic comments as well during that. And I know that I, at one point, had gone down to try to ask one individual to stop cussing at the security staff, and he had some choice words for me. But afterwards, he did de-escalate, and so I really want to just take this moment to appreciate the ways in which they sort of stood with a lot of integrity and didn't allow themselves to be pushed around. But also, they're not. I don't believe our security are like sworn peace officers. They're there, and they're there with their bodies to stand in front of to stand on the other side of this rope here when a meeting is getting out of order. So just wanted to both say to my colleagues, I if it wasn't clear, I definitely don't think that any of you deserved to be attacked or threatened. And also just want to say that the same is true for our security staff who, while it wasn't everybody, while it wasn't the whole crowd, they did have to face some vitriolic comments from a few individuals that day. So just want to thank them for their integrity and their work.
Thank you, Councilmember Ellison. I'm not seeing any others in queue, so I will ask the clerk to call the roll on item 2-4.
Councilmember Payne.
Nay.
Wansley.
Nay.
Vita.
Aye.
Ellison.
No.
Aye.
Osman. Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Chavez.
No.
Chugtai.
Nay.
Koski.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice Chair Rainville.
Aye.
Chair Johnson.
No.
There are 7 ayes and 6 nays.
That motion carries. And with that, we have one more item to take up before we turn to our presentations. We have item 2-5, and I'll just pose this to colleagues. If anyone is interested in a biological break for 5 minutes after item 2-5, let me know. I'm seeing a couple head nods. So I think that's what our plan will be after we get through item 2-5. We'll we'll do just a 5-minute recess for that and then return and finish up with these presentations. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to make this quick. I think a lot of the discussion from the previous one really applied broadly to both of these amendments. My second amendment seeks increased penalties for those who assault or threaten violence against public officials, public employees, or their families. An important point to my colleague, Councilmember Chavez's piece about the resolution that he mentioned is that that was about people working in their jobs. Another important distinction, just like the previous, also different from this previous proposal that we just voted on, that only impacts them when they're performing their duties. This amendment, this one that is different than the previous one, would protect public officials when there are threats to them because of their status as an employee, because of who they are and the role that they have, even if they are not working. So this one is about people following around electeds at home, threatening violence to them in the Skyway, etc. I feel strongly we need to advocate for the safety of everyone who's serving this city, and anything less to me is unacceptable. Chair Johnson and I together made a few calls to some of our labor partners on this to communicate and to share. You know, we are early in this work. You do have a letter of support from the building trades and reflective of the Board of Business Agents. I mentioned speaking with our AFSCME partner earlier today. So I will move this forward.
Thank you, Council Vice President. Councilmember Wansley.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I had a couple of questions again for either staff or the author. So to my understanding, if someone were to assault an elected official, you know, after an investigation, after arrest, they will be charged for a crime. And this might actually be to the author then. Can you explain how this amendment language would change that process?
I appreciate the question. I'm going to have to turn it over to our city attorney because of the legal underpinnings of this.
Chair Johnson, council members, so essentially what this would do would be to enhance the criminal penalty because the object of the assault or the object of the threat is a public official, their family, a public employee because of that status. So, you know, obviously there's just regular assault, regular terroristic threats, but this would increase the penalty because people are being targeted because of their public status.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the increase in charges for assault or other crimes when they're done to elected officials, basically the goal of this amendment is to make the category of public official or public employee a special class or protected class that's above residents, kind of like what's reflected in some of our civil rights, ordinances, both at the city level, also at the state. Just trying to see, are we trying to make ourselves a protected class here?
I mean, I don't think that the comparison to civil rights statutes is exactly right. I mean, I think what this is trying to do is kind of acknowledge that public officials, public employees, you know, sort of put themselves out there to do the business of the public, and when they are targeted because of that, that, you know, this is obviously supposed to be a deterrent, right? So that targeting people because of their status, working for the benefit of the public, would result in an enhanced criminal penalty. So, I mean, in some respects, I see what you're saying. I mean, it's different from a regular assault. Mm-hmm. It would increase the penalty because of the status of people stepping up to do the work of the public, and shouldn't be targeted because of that, you know, service, that public service.
Mm-hmm. And do we know if there's other cities that have also pursued similar changes like this and been able to like get a sense of some of those impacts?
Council chair, council members, I can't say off the top of my head whether there are other cities. I believe that there are, but I haven't done the research to know, you know, kind of the 50-state impact.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. Just a comment on this. So I do want to point out a pattern of selective awareness this council has exhibited when we discuss the safety of public officials and our public employees. As council members highlighted in the prior discussion on item 2.4, when former council member Philippe Cunningham was being targeted with racist and transphobic threats, he had to take out a restraining order because the city provided no support with dealing with those threats. Also in the name, just 6 months ago, there was a Black-led movement of city staff telling this body that they felt unsafe under the leadership of Coordinator Heather Johnson. And the majority of this council looked at those appointees or employees and appointed her anyways. In that case, we also told our employees that we didn't believe their concerns and that their safety didn't matter. So I do want to know, if we were serious about the safety of elected officials and public employees, then let's create a democratic process that was highlighted in the prior conversation, where council members, city staff can use their experiences and insights to address and or strengthen security-related policies and practices that is within our wheelhouse. Equally important, let's make sure to invite the public to be part of that process to guarantee that their First Amendment rights are protected, and thus ensure that our security measures will not compromise their ability to also fully participate in our local democracy, which I've heard we all want to. So I did want to name that, and thank you again for providing those clarifying questions or answers to those questions.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Rainville.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I will be voting yes on this today, and I'm doing this to protect our employees as well as our elected officials. I want to apologize to our employee who had their car burned, to have their tires slashed. That is totally unacceptable, and I will not allow that as long as I'm an elected official. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Chair Rainville. Council President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Yeah, I pass.
Thank you, Council Member Wansley.
And I do want to say I am absolutely 100% supporting this amendment. I'm not sure how threats of violence, murder, and death are conflated with all these other issues that my colleagues are bringing up. But if you don't want to address this issue, don't. But don't conflate it with all other kinds of votes that have no bearing on this conversation that we're having today. Thank you.
Thank you, Council President. Councilmember Wansley.
Oh, I want to make sure Chair Johnson, were you in queue before me? Or you
Councilmember Wansley, as typical practice of chairs, they wait until the end to speak. It's not unprecedented that they could speak before that, but that's typically the practice out of deference and respect for colleagues and wanting to run the meeting.
Okay. Thank you, Chair Johnson. I do want to highlight, the examples that I referenced actually are relevant to what we're discussing today, to show, again, the selective enforcement and selective considerations that is becoming a pattern of when and who we consider deserving to be safe and who and when we decide to ignore. So I did name that for credible purposes. But I absolutely want to underscore the fact that everyone deserves to feel safe, and we must make sure our public officials, know that safety should not come at the cost of criminalizing working class people, especially Black and brown residents, which is a historic pattern for elected officials. This is not made up. The intention behind this amendment or language or efforts might be safety, but we know the road to hell can be paved with good intentions, and badly constructed public safety measures can actually do more harm than good. We've seen this before. A significant example of this is mass incarceration. Harsher sentencing and criminal laws that were passed by elected officials in the late 80s and early 90s were designed to keep super predators and criminals off the streets. 20 years later, with tens of millions of Black and brown and indigenous people now sitting behind bars or holding a criminal record, we now know that those laws disproportionately targeted poor and working class communities of color. There is also an expansive body of evidence that shows that those policies actually did not achieve the intended outcome. So while that is obvious that, on a larger scale than what we're discussing today, I am concerned that this will have the same essential dynamic. We do have a lot of mechanisms that as we've discussed thus far, we can use to keep public officials and public employees safe. Increasing our ability to criminalize people is not an acceptable option. I also want to mention that while this language does not specifically mention criminalizing protests, it's heavily implied based on the timing of when this is being brought forward. I want to name clearly that increasing criminal penalties for protests is inherently racist and reactionary. In 2016, I did work with the Black Lives Matter movement to oppose a bill that Republicans were bringing to the state capitol in response to protests after police murdered Philando Castile. That was also a reactionary attempt to repress, justify protests. This also feels like another reactionary attempt to repress, justify protests. Both are wrong, both are completely ignoring the power differentiation between elected officials and residents using their First Amendment rights. We on this dais have a huge amount of power. We have the power to allocate resources, change policy, and set the political agenda of this city. When people tell us that they are hurting or they need something, we also have the responsibility to use our power to help them. People with power have a responsibility to de-escalate conflict before it comes to conflict. And if we want our chambers to be calm, one of the best tools we can use to make that happen is to actually meet residents' needs and take their concerns seriously. So they are not here having to protest because of it. That's a conversation that needs to be having. And I'm sorry, I'm hearing a lot of chatter outside of this because it's a one mic situation. I'm sorry if this is not in agreement with your spirit, but that is the basis of the conversation that I think many of us want to have after today, outside of relying on tools that we know are not effective, like criminalizing people.
Thank you. And I'll remind all of my colleagues to please do not speak when others are in queue and have the mic. So we'll now go on to Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. I'm struggling with this conversation because previous council members are being talked about for actions that they took to keep them in their family safety, to keep them and their family safe, like a restraining order. I had to take a restraining order out too. I had to take a restraining order on a person who physically trapped me and my 2 Ward 4 staffs at the top of a 2-story escalator. A physical trapping, literally seeing our lives flash before our eyes. I am just struggling with this because all we're asking for is support here. We can't go back and change what happened on the previous council. We can't say what people on the previous council should or shouldn't have done to protect them and their families. What I'm saying today and what I'm asking on support for is what has happened to me and what I've witnessed happen to my colleagues, rather it was on social media, over the phone, in person. It is now. We're in the moment now. This is not about someone else's restraining order. I have a restraining order, and I'm going to be happy to pass it out to all my colleagues as I was instructed to by MPD when I get a physical copy of it. But I'm here right now, I'm serving on this body with 12 other people, and I'm asking for support because I felt like mine and my staff's life was physically threatened. All we could see that day was falling down 50 stairs in the U.S. Bank building on an escalator that we were trapped on.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Chugtai.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I started my comments on the last item with this, and I'm going to do it again. I don't think it is okay or acceptable or should be normalized in any way that any one of us, it doesn't matter which side of the dais you sit on or how you vote, should experience any form of violence, intimidation, threats in carrying out your jobs, our jobs. We're all doing our best with the information that we have at any given moment, and being threatened, experiencing acts of violence is not okay. And I think there are, for those of you who have been here longer, and you know, in this moment, I am thinking about our council president who has consistently been someone who has talked about the safety of elected officials in the time that I've been here, and I know that she speaks to it from an incredible amount of personal experience. So just want to reiterate that piece, and then I want to move into the actual language of this amendment. I understand that we're trying to solve for a safety problem with this, and I come to this issue with a lot of personal experience. I have worked with and for a lot of public officials, particularly those who are women of color with children, and people of color broadly who have been subject to violence directed towards them and towards their families. I've spent a lot of time personally moving children, creating safety plans, and comforting the targets of these acts of violence. I have personally been the target of racialized and gendered violence at many points throughout my time as a candidate and as a policymaker just over these last 2 years. I want the cycle of violence to stop, and I don't think that this is the way to do it. I don't think that we make ourselves safer with it. Asking the state to increase criminal penalties for those who inflict or threaten an act of violence on public officials or public employees, that's what this item is doing. The reality is, though, in the places that have implemented laws like this, right, in the best case scenario, we pass this item and then the legislature acts and does the thing we want them to. Other states have done that, and the impact in real life, in real time, has been harsher criminal penalties and criminalization of people of color, of LGBTQ people, and of those without permanent citizenship status. These laws have not protected marginalized public officials from violence rooted in misogyny or in white supremacy. These laws historically have been carried by far-right Republicans, both in other states and in Minnesota. In moments when the increase in criminal penalties was about the protest of homes, the people protesting the homes of elected officials, restricting the right of people to do that. It didn't happen as a result of extremists showing up outside of the homes of public officials of color with guns. It happened as a result of people protesting outside of conservative leaders of police unions. So I just, I want to be really, really rooted in in the best case scenario, what we're really talking about doing here. I don't want myself or any of you to be put in harm's way. I think it's a really good thing that we're trying to address this issue. Especially because so many of us on this body and beyond have been victim to serious violence, everything from death and rape threats to gunshots through people's homes to being chased to vehicles while holding your toddler in your arms. That type of violence has happened over the years, and I don't want it to continue to be the case. I'm willing to put in work with all of you on figuring out what the right solutions are. All I'm saying is that this solution has not worked to protect people like us from acts of violence like this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. I added myself to queue to speak on this. First, I just want to clarify one thing. This is not increasing penalties for protests. This is about threats and actual acts of violence. And I think it does harm to our legal, rightful protesters to conflate this in any way as being an increased penalty for them. And it kind of reminds me of when we heard from some conservative media commentators with these talking points trying to conflate all of the protesters in Minneapolis who were standing in righteous outrage against the murder of George Floyd, they were trying to conflate them as violent and threatening violence and all of that, when we know that it wasn't the thousands and thousands of people out marching in righteous outrage that were out there burning down our neighborhoods. So I think it does a disservice to protesters to conflate this because this is about actual acts of violence. Now, to speak to this, it's not normal for most people in their work occupations to get multiple threats of assassination. It's not. These jobs are fundamentally different because of that. And it affects children, it affects spouses, it affects neighbors. When that last very public threat we got about placing pipe bombs around our homes was reported in the news, I had people reaching out as far away as a couple blocks from my house to ask if their homes needed to be evacuated as well. I mean, this is not normal stuff. And colleagues, I'm not going to be here in 10 months on this dais. I'm going to be back in the private sector somewhere. And so I don't stand to gain a lot from this, but with this item, I am thinking about all of you because society is changing. What is happening now around elected officials, it's not normal. And when I started, and Councilmember Goodman is the longest serving, can maybe provide some feedback on this, but we didn't face this stuff when I started. It's been changing, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And it has a really detrimental effect on democracy. I've talked with candidates from all different jurisdictions, and I'm telling you, it's something they're thinking about, and they're taking it really seriously. And they're going, I would love to step up and serve, and I've got a great background, I'm committed to my community, but you know what? I don't know if I can put my family through what you are actually dealing with now. I don't know with my kids if I can actually expose them to people coming to our homes with a gun. I mean, this is conversations happening and decisions being made, and we are seeing good people who would run who are not because of these threats. And we got to change that because it's headed in the wrong direction for democracy. And this is an opportunity to stand up in terms of democracy and say, we can't tolerate this, and we need to take a stand. And that's what I see with this. And so I really appreciate the author for bringing this item forward, and I will be supporting this item. Thank you. I'm not seeing anyone else in queue, so with that, I will ask the clerk to call the roll on item 2.5.
Councilmember Payne.
Nay.
Wansley.
Nay.
Vita.
Aye.
Ellison is absent. Osman.
Aye.
Goodman.
Aye.
Jenkins.
Aye.
Chavez.
No.
Chugtai.
No.
Koski.
Aye.
Palmisano.
Aye.
Vice Chair Rainville.
Aye.
Chair Johnson.
Aye.
There are 8 ayes and 4 nays.
That motion carries. And now, colleagues, we'll take a 5-minute recess and return with our IGR team with the 3 presentations. Thank you. All right, everyone, we are going to resume this Intergovernmental Relations Committee meeting, and we have 3 presentations. I do want to let our committee members know that we are being cognizant of time with the Committee of the Whole meeting coming up at 1:30, and I am guessing people would like an opportunity for lunch as well. And so we also have the director who has to be back over at the Capitol, and folks with some personal business as well, or appointments. So we are going to try to get through these 3 items pretty quickly, and we'll start by welcoming up the director for item number 3 for a federal, state, and legislative update. And I would ask that committee members please save their questions until the end of the presentation, and that we can ask those. Welcome, Director.
Thank you, Chair Johnson and committee members, and I am going to try to move relatively quickly. We also have Ms. Olson, who's going to be doing an update on federal appropriations, and we have some staff who have to leave at 1, but who are here for questions on that as well. So we're going to try to get through this quickly. I did just want to briefly acknowledge that our government relations representatives, Steve Huser and Indiria Falana, and our seasonal legislative aide, Chloe Walwork, are all at the Capitol juggling many hearings and tracking bills today, so they can't be here for this presentation. Just want to thank them for their work, and also thank Lauren for all her work in tracking items related to the Met Council and keeping us going with the federal appropriations process. There's a lot happening, and I'm just really proud of the work the team's doing to keep track of everything. So on that note, just thought I'd update our statistic that I shared with you last time. Now there have been 2,500 bills introduced in the House, 2,600 in the Senate as of yesterday. 13 bills have been passed by both chambers and have been signed by the governor. A couple of new ones since we last presented to you that have gone through are funding for the Attorney General's office for enhanced criminal enforcement related initiatives, $5 million for the Minnesota Food Shelf Program, a requirement that the rate of inflation is incorporated in the state budget forecast, and I'll talk a bit more about the February forecast in a moment. And then, of course, driver's license for all and restore the vote have both passed and have now been signed by the governor. And those are priorities of the city, and I'm excited to see those passed. The February forecast was released last week. The surplus is the same as it was in the December forecast, which is $17.5 billion. $12.5 billion of that is left over from the previous biennium, meaning it's one-time money. But as I noted, the rate of inflation is now included in the forecast, and it wasn't before. So revenues actually went up, but the surplus is the same. So even though costs have gone up because the state's including the rate of inflation, because revenues also went up, the surplus remained the same in the February forecast. And the state budget office is forecasting that revenues will continue to exceed spending through fiscal year 2027. So this forecast is what determines the budget targets for spending committees at the legislature. And so we anticipate that those targets will come out sometime in the next couple of weeks. And that's what will inform how much is spent in each committee area, and ultimately what's included in the state budget at the end of session. Updates on some of our city priorities. This is not an exhaustive list, just trying to highlight some items that I know are of interest to the council. So if something's not on here that you have a question about, please do let me know, either now or after the meeting. But I did want to note that yesterday the House passed a capital investment bill. This included both general obligation bonds and then a second bill that included cash appropriations. This bill did include $9.9 million for the Central City Stormwater Tunnel project, which is one of the city's bonding priorities. This bill has been characterized by the capital investment chairs as the 2022 bonding bill, since there was not a bonding bill last year, and they are planning to then, assuming this passes the Senate as well, which is not a certainty, but it will be considered by the Senate, then they plan to write another bonding bill they will consider the 2023 bonding bill. So we do hope that in the 2023 bill there are more city projects, but we're excited that the Central City Stormwater Tunnel is included in the bill that's moving right now. Both the House and Senate have passed legislation related to catalytic converter theft, and it adds requirements for scrap metal dealers that buy these products, and it adds criminal penalties for the illegal possession or acquisition of catalytic converters. The House and Senate have passed slightly different versions, and so at this point, either the House has to adopt the Senate version or it'll go to a conference committee, but it has been passed by both bodies. Adult use cannabis legalization continues to move through the many committees that it needs to move through in both the House and Senate. We did share a detailed update with council members last week via email about some of the priorities that the IGR team is tracking. One of those is around licensing. At first, the bill didn't have any licensing authority for local governments. Now it does have a registration process, but it only allows local governments to charge a one-time $200 fee. By comparison, we charge $350 per year for tobacco licensing. So we are continuing to work with our partners at the League of Minnesota Cities to push for some more licensing authority and increased revenue sharing for local governments around adult use cannabis. The Municipal Building Commission bill, this is a bill to repeal the statute that created the Municipal Building Commission, and instead the city and the county would come to an agreement to manage this building and keeping the employees who currently work for the Municipal Building Commission. That bill had a hearing last Friday in the Senate. It was a very nice hearing. We learned some fun facts about the history of City Hall, like that there used to be a chicken coop in this building and horse stables. Yeah, and IGR Vice Chair Rainville was able to come testify in support of that, and so that has met the deadline in the Senate, and so then we're working to meet the second deadline in the House over the next couple of weeks on that bill. There is a bill that has a hearing this week in the Senate. It's authored by Senator Fateh in the Senate and Representative Jordan in the House. It would clarify that the adoption or amendment of comprehensive plans consistent with the Met Council comprehensive planning statutes does not constitute conduct that would be defined under the environmental rights chapter of law. So essentially that it wouldn't require an environmental review. So that bill has a hearing this week. And that, of course, relates to our own comprehensive plans and that process. And then lastly, I just wanted to touch on elections. There are a number of elections bills moving. Our seasonal legislative aide, Chloe Walwork, has been our point person on elections. She's doing a great job of tracking all of the different things and working with Clerk Carl and the city's elections director to weigh in. So there are things related to, as was mentioned earlier, safety of elections officials. There is some funding support for local elections offices to help to help us with our elections process. And there is some bills related to ranked choice voting tabulation that our elections office is supportive of. So we've been trying to weigh in. And then there's a bill related to making it easier for students to register to vote. Councilmember Wansley testified in support of that bill. And so we are trying to weigh in on all of those as we can, but there's a lot going on related to elections as well. And perhaps at our next update, we could have Chloe come and get some practice presenting to the council and do a more comprehensive update there. I did want to just focus in a little bit more on housing and homelessness, because there are many, many things moving here, and it has been identified as a key priority of both the House and Senate, and I know it's a large priority for all of you as well. Last week, the budget chairs, the housing budget chairs in the House and Senate, with Senator Lindsay Port in the Senate and Representative Mike Howard in the House, and Representative Mike Howard is now a member of the Minneapolis delegation. They released their priorities for their budget. So now budget targets haven't been released yet, so we don't know what their budget target will be, but they're seeking $1 billion for housing, with their 3 goals being to end youth homelessness by 2030, to cut racial disparities in home ownership in half, and to build and preserve 150,000 homes to address the shortage of affordable housing available in Minnesota. So some of the ways they would do that would be by creating a state-based rent-based housing voucher program and other forms of direct support to low-income families to try to prevent homelessness. They are trying to fast-track $100 million in the state's Family Homeless Prevention and Assistance Program, which is a form of emergency rental assistance. They want to support the first-generation homebuyer down payment assistance program. And then, again, they plan to invest in things like housing infrastructure bonds and other state programs that invest in the creation of new affordable housing. There are also a number of bills around renter protections that are moving, and some other housing bills that I wanted to highlight. One of the bills that's moving is source of income protection, similar to an ordinance the city adopted many years ago now, saying that a property owner cannot decline to rent to someone based on their source of income. So if that source of income for rent is a Section 8 voucher or housing choice voucher, they have to accept that. And so that is moving now at the state level in both the House and Senate. There is a bill that would require a right to counsel for residents, for public housing residents if they're facing eviction. There is a bill that would prohibit eviction for non-payment of rent if the renter has a pending application for rental assistance. This is similar to something that was in place during the eviction moratorium during the pandemic, that if somebody had a pending application for emergency rental assistance, they could not be evicted for non-payment of rent. And then there's also a bill moving that would require a pre-eviction filing notice, which again is a policy that the city has already adopted, requiring a 14-day pre-filing notice before somebody can be evicted for non-payment of rent. So those are examples. That's not an exhaustive list of all the renter protection bills, but those are some that are moving at the state level, and we do anticipate that these do have a path forward toward adoption this session. There is also a bill that we testified in support of last week that would eliminate the 30-year limit on affordable housing covenants. So right now, state statute does limit our ability to be able to require that housing be affordable for longer than 30 years. This would allow government units to have a longer affordability period than 30 years. So it would mean housing we're funding under the Affordable Housing Trust Fund could have longer term affordability, which we think would be a good thing. It is part of our legislative agenda. The Pathways Home Act passed the House last week. It has not passed the Senate yet. This is a package for homelessness response. Sorry, I gotta find my notes here. But it includes shelter capital, funding for shelter capital, emergency services grants, and the Homeless Youth Act. And it's $100 million. So that has passed the House, has not passed the Senate yet. MPHA is seeking $45 million to preserve its scattered site housing. That bill had a hearing last week, and the mayor testified in support of it. That's authored by Senator Fateh in the Senate. And then I already mentioned the bonding bill that passed yesterday in the House. That did include $72 million for public housing rehabilitation. And again, that bill still needs to be considered by the Senate. We're not sure what its path is in the Senate, but we do expect it to be taken up either this week or next week. And then I just wanted to end by reiterating some of the key dates. We've already mentioned a couple of times that this Friday is the first deadline. That's for committees to act favorably on bills in the House of Origin. That applies to policy bills. It doesn't apply to funding bills or tax bills. Also, if a bill was referred directly to a finance committee, at least in the House, it still can be heard after the 10th. So it's the deadline, but there's also some flexibility around that. The second deadline is March 24th, and then the deadline for major appropriation and finance bills is April 4th. And again, the last day of session is May 22nd, so we're just about halfway through. And there is a lot that has happened, but there's still a lot left to do, and so it'll be exciting to see what all happens throughout the rest of session. And that was my very quick overview. Sorry to kind of rush through it, but happy to take questions if there are any before we move to federal appropriations.
Great, thank you so much, Director. And I'm just going to look real quick to see if there's any questions or comments from colleagues. Councilmember Vita.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Thank you for the presentation. I didn't see anything in here, but I'm wondering, we're going to have a presentation next from the Chief of Police, and he is asking for 2 additional deputy chiefs, and I know that that has to happen at the state level. I'm wondering if there's a bill that is asking for those, and if there's not, does that March 10th deadline apply to that?
Yes, Chair Johnson and Councilmember Vita, there is a bill that has been drafted. We're still waiting on it to be introduced. However, we do know that Senator Latz, who's the chair of the Public Safety Committee in the Senate, has told us he supports this, and he intends to work on a sort of comprehensive policy bill. And so I think there will be a way to get that amended into that bill, even if it doesn't get a hearing by this Friday. But yes, there is a bill that's being drafted, and we're working to find strategies to make sure it's moving forward.
Thank you. Council President Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair Johnson. Just a clarification on the on Senator Fateh's bill regarding the 2040 plan, essentially. Did you say it would add an environmental review or eliminate it by it? I couldn't determine.
Yes, Chair Johnson and Council President, it would clarify that comprehensive plans that are reviewed by the Met Council do not need to have an environmental review. So it would clarify statute.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other comments or questions from colleagues? Not seeing any, so thank you for that presentation, and I'll direct the clerk to receive and file that report. And next up, we'll move to our 2024 Congressional Directed Spending presentation. Welcome, Ms. Olson.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, council members. I'm Lauren Olson, Senior Government Relations Representative. I know it's been a long meeting, and I'll try to give you the expedited version of this, but allow you to ask any questions that you have. So I did previously kind of give you a heads up that we were waiting for details on the earmarks process. Well, then suddenly, I think it was February 23rd, we heard that the Senate's going to have a process and their deadline was going to be March 10th. Based on the last couple of years, we were kind of hoping we would have till mid-April or so. So this was even much more accelerated than I guess we were hoping for. But we had begun the process so that we could deal with whatever they threw at us. So we're in a good position, but it also means that we are still massaging some of these to be as competitive as possible for submission on Friday. So some of the work is ongoing right now, but I'll tell you a little bit more about it. So the Senate deadline, again, is this Friday, the 10th. Nonprofits and government agencies can apply from specific accounts made available from the House and Senate. The accounts in the House and Senate are different from one another in terms of what's available. In the House earmarks process was also recently announced. The deadline for us to get projects into Representative Omar is March 17th. Again, as I had advised you guys before, the House process, it's different in nature and how it functions. So each member gets to pick up to 15 projects. Representative Omar was looking for shovel ready. Omar's office is hosting a Q&A, which I think is a nice thing if you know people in the community that are looking for more information about this. I will note that each member of the House could have their own deadline, depending on how fast they want to get their information in. A lot of them have to submit projects into another subcommittee by like the 24th, so they're working on an extremely tight turnaround as well. So just a quick note again about the fact that the Senate accounts that are available and the House accounts are different. And also the House under GOP leadership made some changes this year. They've said that they will not accept earmark requests from certain accounts like labor, health, and human services or financial services. They also noted that they will not take burn justice projects that they feel undermine the Second Amendment or appear to be anti-law enforcement. A lot of the law enforcement or community public safety issues do get burn grants. So this is the House's commentary, and it gives you some insights into how they might handle earmarks this year. So the city has 5 projects that we tend to bring. First one, we've brought a couple times, and last year was our top priority, which is 38th Street Thrive, to implement the strategic plan that was community-led and developed and adopted by the city for 38th Street area, including the historic cultural district. We are in the process of kind of reworking that one, just because the ask before was to fund a community development committee, and that hasn't been seen as the allowable cost, so we are reframing it to ask for resources that will allow us to implement elements of that plan around affordable housing and business support in the vicinity of like 38th and Chicago and the 38th Street Cultural Corridor. Next, we have $2.5 million for violence interrupters. And by the way, Josh is out in the hallway somewhere, Peterson. If anyone has questions about this, we might need to pull them up now because he's available till 1 o'clock. So this additional money would allow either an expansion of like the hours of service currently offered, and it's enough money to fund additional teams and therefore reach different areas with violence interrupters. There's also a portion of this money that would fund training and technical assistance, as well as kind of looking at ways to measure the impact of this work. Before I go on, does anyone have a question for Josh Peterson about this particular item? If so, he might be able to speak to it for 1 minute.
I am not seeing anyone in queue. Thank you.
Okay. All right. All right, thanks. All right, next item, emergency operations and training facility. I think you're familiar with this. We are still seeking money to pay for some modular components that could be at the emergency operations and training facility that would allow the fire department and other first responders to train on specialized rescue techniques, including responding to rail disasters and confined space rescue, et cetera. Still haven't quite nailed down the source on that, so we're seeking that again. Pedestrian access and safety, again, this will help fund our needs to ensure that the streets are accessible to everyone through ADA improvements and et cetera. Farmers Market, Minneapolis Farmers Market infrastructure, so it's the one near the impound lot, needs a new roof, among other pedestrian and parking improvements. That once the new roof is in place, it will support solar panels, and then that will allow better lighting and hot water and some other additions. So that's that request. We do have folks available to speak to that if you have questions on that one. So we are required by the Senate process to apply ranking. This is the proposed ranking from IGR. It's mainly based on how competitive we think these might be in the process and in the accounts that they're applying for. 38th Street is one that we've been talking to people about, and our senators and Representative Omar understand that it's very important priority, so I think that was one reason why it remains at the top of the list. We believe the violence interrupter work is an excellent fit for what has typically gotten funded through earmarks and through the Senate account. However, we do see the House saying that they're going to be very particular about what kinds of stuff is funded by burn grants. And the other things are fairly close together. I think I've mentioned to you before that I don't think the ranking is everything at the end of the day, but I do think, identifying a couple top priorities is kind of what's most relevant. So I'll stop there and see if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Olson. I am not seeing anyone in queue. I would only ask, so on our agenda, we have this as receiving and filing an update, but I know there's proposed rankings. Are you looking for any action specifically from this body other than receiving and filing?
I think as long as if you wish to change the rankings or something, that would require an action. Otherwise, I think as long as you're comfortable with this plan, you don't need action.
All right, thank you. I'm not seeing any disagreement with it or any comments. So Appreciate that. I'll go ahead and direct the clerk to receive and file this presentation. Thank you. And we'll move on to our last, which is the federal legislative agenda. I'll also note that I'll be turning the chair over to Vice Chair Rainville because I have a medical appointment for one of my children that I must attend. So, thank you.
Go ahead, Director Olson.
Okay.
Ms. Olson, excuse me, are you a director?
I was,
or-
I was the interim director, so we'll go,
Okay.
that's. makes
Please go
sense.
forward.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and council members. I'm going to keep this one very brief as well. We are updating the federal agenda for the city to just include some updates as it relates to small wireless. As you know, there's a few issues that come up when we talk about small wireless. So, you know, this is kind of the future of wireless technology requires this many low-mounted antennas as the way to provide 5G. And so people have certainly noticed the proliferation of the infrastructure required for this. And it's called small cell because each antenna actually covers a smaller area. That's why it's called small wireless, excuse me. We're updating our policies because I think you are familiar with the fact that federal law preempts us very much when it comes to any control over siting of these, this infrastructure. And there's also questions that I think some people in the public have about health associated with this infrastructure because there are radio frequency emissions associated with this infrastructure. And although, so the FCC is obligated to maintain standards of safety around radio frequency emissions, and while they say that the typical emissions from this type of infrastructure is many times below with their current standards, I think a lot of people just want to refresh those standards because of the kind of the proliferation required for this type of infrastructure. So due to the concerns that exist about wishing there was a little bit more control over the siting of these, and also questions people have about health. We're updating our policies consistent with the National League of Cities about basically calling for the FCC to make sure that they do an update of the radio frequency emission standards, and to either determine and ensure that they're the right standard now, or if they needed to be changed. The other thing we're looking for is just to maintain the authority that cities should have and do have over the right-of-way to some extent. But we do recognize, when it comes to certain things like that, ensuring our communication tools and systems in the United States, can work for everyone. There's a level of federal preemption there. But at the same time, we want to be able to control our right-of-way. And you guys, and excuse me, you've used that casual term, the city attorney's office would know all the details, but there are limited things that we are able to do, but there's a lot of things that we are not able to do since this is in the realm of the federal government. So we're seeking to maintain some of that control where we can, and also get those emission standards updated. So are there any questions about that?
Any questions from the dais here? Seeing none, thank you very much for the presentation. I move to receive and file this.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, this item is a motion to amend
Okay.
federal legislative agenda, so you should take a voice vote.
Thank you, Clerk. Could you please take a voice vote to approve this amended agenda item?
Aye.
Wansley,
Aye.
Vita is absent, Ellison is absent, Osman is absent, Goodman is absent, Jenkins,
Aye.
Chavez,
Aye.
Chugtai,
Aye.
Koski,
Aye.
Palmisano,
Aye.
Vice Chair Rainville.
Aye.
There are 8 ayes.
Thank you, and seeing no further business before us, I move to, Councilmember Vita. Would the clerk please record that vote? Thank
I
you.
will record Councilmember Vita's voting aye. Thank you.
And again, seeing no further business, I move to adjourn this meeting. Thank you.
For government